Solar Car Challenge is a 15-month educational cycle. We are the top project-based STEM initiative where we help motivate students in science and engineering, alternative energy. And we do this throughout the year by teaching them how they should design it, how they engineer it, how they construct their car, and then how to race it, as well as things along the line with teaching commitment, teaching them dedication, so that when they finish this project after 15 months, they're going to be there at the race having the best time of their life. Hands-on, project-based STEM initiatives are the key to help motivate students. You're actually touching and making things work. And the expression on your face of, we've been able to get the solar array to put out the right amount of power, it's huge. And that excitement creates motivation and carries you through all the rest of the project.
I'm the captain, I'm the welder, and mechanical.
I'm mechanical and I work on grinding the car.
I do electrical and finance.
I mostly work on electrical and telemetry stuff.
Electrical and SolidWorks.
And I work on anything that needs to be worked on.
It's a real tight-knit team and we all know each other real well. And we all joke around and we work together. And if somebody's in trouble, we can all help each other out, so yeah.
I knew absolutely nothing about electronics or anything before I started here. Now I think I know a fair bit.
A lot of people think it's a college thing, and yes, there are colleges with solar car programs, but the high school, everyone's like, it's such an amazing experience.
So like, wait, what? You built this? How could you build that? I couldn't build that. It would take me centuries to build that.
Our big thing is problem solving. So if there's a problem, we find a way to solve it. It seems simple in itself, but at times it can get very complicated.
I feel a lot of pride, really. We all put a lot of hard work, dedication, and time into building this, and just seeing us go across that finish line means the world.
For new teams and new teachers, you don't have to be afraid of the technology involved in this. There are people out there who are willing to come in to your school and help you with it. It improves your program. It enriches your teaching.
The Solar Car Challenge provides a lot of resources for first-year teams. We provide workshops throughout the year for new teams where you get to talk about how to actually put a car together, the mechanical, the electrical, and you get a lot of other teams participating and providing inputs.
So while we're a competition, we're also an educational institute, and that's our primary focus.
Everybody there has bled and sweat and cried as much as all the other teams, and so if one car breaks down, you have 3 or 4 other teams there to try to help them because they know how hard it was to try to get to where they are.
And the winner of day 2 in the Advanced Classic Division, 257.9 miles total, Iron Lions. Congratulations.
Everybody behind the scenes, all of our staff, are volunteers because we believe in what we're doing. These are people who've either raced in preceding races or are somehow or other involved in the solar community.
I started Solar Car in high school, and I quickly developed a love for science and technology.
And I raced for 2 years, and I've never left.
I know what it meant to me. It's what really solidified my desire to be an engineer, set me down a great career path that I've absolutely loved, and I want to make sure that other people have that opportunity.
When I used to race in 1997, we had 5 cars. Last year, we had more than 100 teams actively building cars.
We deal with between 1,500 and 2,000 in our education program, and we've been doing it for 26 years now. It's a lot of people.
After you put 15 months into this, with all the sweat and the brain power and the successes and a few failures, the time you spent after school and on Saturdays, when you're finally on the road driving your solar car, you say, this car is something that I built. The pride that you have of being able to do something that maybe a college or a corporation does, and you're doing it as a high school student, it makes you proud. I always like to start off these events by trying to find out and let you know who's here. So I'd like to ask all the volunteers for the Solar Car Challenge to stand up and introduce yourself, starting with our race ambassador over here. And we'll go down the front row. Because you've got to realize we are a volunteer event. Nobody here gets paid. We do it because we love what we're doing. We do it because we know that we're having a positive impact on the lives of students. And we've just finished a national survey of people who've taken part in this event. And we realized that people were dramatically affected by this. 92% who took part in the Solar Car Challenge went on to doing something in some kind of engineering applying solar energy. So that's why we love it so much. So tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Negratti. I currently serve as a member of the board of directors for the organization. I'm the race ambassador. Raced back in 2013 when we went from Fort Worth to LA, and I've come back every year since. Outside of this, I am a mechanical engineer.
Thank you, Christian.
Hey everybody, my name is John Ching. I'm the staff coordinator for the event. I manage all the judges, supervising during the race. I've been with the Solar Car Challenge since 2012. Where I raced in the coach drive in 2014. We raced from Dallas all the way out. In my professional life, I'm a facilities manager.
Mr. Water Station, would you like to introduce yourself? You know, okay. Brandon.
Brandon Ching, board member also. I oversee our scoring and auditing races.
State Hubbard. I oversee the electrical division for Division 2. I've been race since 2017, and I'm a left.
Hello, everyone. My name is Triton. I am the technical director at Solar Challenge. So whenever we go to final sign-offs on the final inspections, I raced from 2016 to 2020 with the solar version, and then I'm currently doing it the last program. Hi, everybody. My name is Cannonball. I was in the Solar Challenge, and I currently teach the science.
And training team, the team focused solar team. I've been through this ever since. Also raced with the University of Michigan, got back. Racing Australia, World Solar Challenge, Texas.
And we have a real privilege today. We're going to get a chance to see Will's car that was maybe not the one, but one similar to what did the Cannonball run, which was from New York to Los Angeles. This was an incredible experience. Will, thank you for being here. These are all great people, but they all started in a seat like you are sitting here. They all became part of this race because they learned something from it, and they were able to figure out that not only did they get something, but they wanted to give back. So we have a program we call our intern program, where the qualifications are you've taken part in the Solar Car Challenge, and you want to come back and be a mentor and help judge. So think about that down the road in the future. Let's take a look at some things here. Why participate in the Solar Car Challenge? Well, you learn how to develop teamwork, which is huge because wherever you go, whatever job you're going to get in life, you're going to need to be able to work with other people. That's a huge thing. I remember my first team back in 1989. Wow, that's a long time ago. But I remember that they had no concept of what teamwork was. There were 7 of them. Unfortunately, 6 of them were seniors. 1 of them was junior. And the only way they had to work with each other is somebody was displeased. They'd throw something at them. You don't want to do this. You want to work together and develop ways to be able to collaborate. You want to be able to learn something about problem solving. You want to learn something about how to handle successes and failures. You problem solve, you succeed, you problem solve, you fail, but you pick yourself back up again. You learn something about dedication and commitment to a project, but you can't do this part way. Solar Car Project is the top project-based STEM initiative. It will require more of you than anything else you've ever done. But what you get out of this is incredible experience. And a number of you I know have done that. Probably you've seen what it's all about, and you've come away a better man and starting a new team here. And thank you for that. The planning for this year, we are thinking about trying to do a how to build project. The reason being that many of the people who come into this have never done any measuring, cutting, welding, soldering, CAD, or other skills that you need to build a solar car. So one of the things that we try to make sure is by the time you get away from this, that you've got some good basic skills. I have to go back to an advisor that I had talked into sponsoring the San Diego team. And he had been the sponsor of the college team out of San Diego. And he calls me up and he's yelling me on the phone and he said, Duck, what's wrong? What's wrong with these kids? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I go to my college team and I say, I want you to build me a solar car. It needs to be this way and that way. And he said, 2 months later, they've come back with a plan and they're developing it. They know what they're doing is starting to build. And I said, well, that's okay. And he said, what about the high school? And he said, well, I go out there and I told them, we want you to build a solar car and I want to see you back here in such and such time. And here's how you have to do stuff. And the kids just stood there and looked at him because nobody had taught them how to turn a screwdriver, how to cut, how to weld, how to solder, all these basic things. So we're working on trying to do a workshop on just those basic things. We've got a program and a gentleman from Mineral Wells who does an outstanding job providing this kind of information. So we're going to maybe do a workshop to give people a chance to see welding, how it should be done, soldering, how it should be done. And then in our January workshop, we do have a welding and soldering specialty lab that we do. You can see here that the key deadline is if you intend to race, you need to give us a notification by January 31st. That doesn't obligate you to race. It just means that your name is put on a roll so that we can send you information. So if you intend to race or you think you want to race, if you're going to be there as an observer, send us an intent so that we can put you on the mailing list and make sure that you've got all the information. Registration materials are due on March 1st. That's a registration packet, everything complete. Team check-in on July 15th. Scrutineering 16th through 18th. Race start 19th through the 23rd. This year it's a cross-country race. Brandon's going to talk to you about how you go through the cross-country race. Should be good. What's new this year now, we've got to tread on this lightly because we've got a lot of people who were talking some of these new things. But one of the things we're bringing back is a full presentation. When COVID hit, we approached this by doing videos of the team. But there's nothing like me going around and talking to you and you talking to me and you say, Doc, we had a great year. We engineered this and look what happened. Or Doc, we engineered this and it failed horribly. We had to pick ourselves back up. One of the things that I so strongly encourage is your ability to be able to talk about what you're doing. One, it'll be able to help you raise money for your project. And we require you to raise money for your project. I met a student outside looking at the car just a minute ago. And a young man came up to me and he stuck out his hand and he looked me in the eye and he said, I am so-and-so. And I turned back around and said, hey, you're on the road right now to raising money because there's nobody out there who better loves a young person coming up, shaking your hand, looking in your eye and saying, I'm so-and-so and I want you to know. That's an impressive thing. So I want to talk about that. Why do you need to communicate? Well, or anything else, you need to talk to your administration. You need to be able to talk to your community. You need to go give talks to the Rotary clubs, and Kiwanis and Lions clubs and chambers of commerce. Anybody who can get involved in your project. Bring the community into what you're doing. That's huge. Communication is important. We have a new emphasis on materials technology this year. The registration packet needs to include a spreadsheet setting out what you bought. We want you to approach this as a business, that you start off, you have a plan, you develop a financial plan, and you start financing your project. You build your car, and then you analyze what's going on. I'll stress that a little bit, but that's an interesting thing to see what you're spending your money on. Why is this important? Because engineering under any kind of guise is how you are able to manage your money. I had a team that wanted to build a solar car to use these highfalutin mountain bike brakes. Each brake cost $600. We needed 6. So that was a relatively large amount of money to raise in this kind of thing. So I said, okay, guys, let's go to the state fair, and we'll use an old project which is done by many solar cars, which is sell a solar cell. So we would talk to people and say, buy a solar cell for our solar car, give us $10 or $20, whatever it is, and we'll put your name on the car. So they thought, okay, we can go down there in a couple of days and we'll raise money at the state fair. So we go down there. We spend the first day about 8 hours down there. We raised $110. We ended up, after spending about 12 days at the state fair, of raising $1,100. Yet we needed $3,600 to buy those mountain brakes. So what did we learn? We learned how much effort goes into being able to raise the money to build your dreams. And every engineering project is about that. How much money you've got, what do we want to do? Now we have to deal with it. It also makes you responsible too. You realize how hard it is to raise that money. You realize how tough it is to go look somebody in the face and say, I want your money. Give us your money here. And it's a powerful thing when they open their wallet and give it to you. That's cool. We have some mechanical changes, roll bar dimensions, battery capacities. Notice your battery capacity for your cruiser is 10.5 kilowatts. I think the original rules said 10, but we made it 10.5. That accommodates the new batteries. We have a new addition in scrutineering. We're going to be weighing your vehicle. We have weights on each, scales on each one of the wheels, and that way we can determine your weight distribution in the car. That helps us better understand the stability of your car. Will it be stable when it's on the road? One of the things we found was that teams would actually get out and race, and they would do so bad that they would end up owing us miles. They had penalties. And I remember one team left the race owing us 18 miles because of all the penalties they had. Now, that's not the kind of thing you want to go back and tell your sponsors. How did you do in the race? Oh, we owe them 18 miles. So we developed the idea of forever miles. We offer you 25 forever miles, which no matter what penalties you get, you always have a chance to get those 25. That 25 is based on the quality of your registration packet, the quality of your scrape book, the quality of your team video, and your 5-minute oral presentation. And if you do a good job on all of those, you get 25 miles that nobody can take away from you. Now that's huge. That's the kind of stuff you do before you get to the race, except for the 5-minute oral. And it's a way for you to start off with a little edge over another team. When you do your oral presentations, and I'll do an extensive workshop on this in January, when you do that oral presentation, you need to think about how you're going to be talking. Here's a team getting ready to make a presentation. Notice they're all in similar attire. That means they're organized. You notice that they're all looking at the speaker. Well, almost all looking at the speaker. They've got to practice at what they've done, and so that they are focusing everybody's attention on what the speaker's doing. So we look for that. Oral presentation. Did the presentation give a full statement about the project? The team makes presentations without notes. Did the team provide visual aids? Now let's start about building project. By the way, that was a famous Oregon car in the 2023 race, going across the desert. What's our closet? One of the interesting things is we're not about a competition. We are about a cooperation. And you say, well, that sounds like a lot of words, a lot of hot air. But it's our philosophy. The goal is that, yeah, we're here. Yes, you want to win first or second or third. You want a trophy because you take that back home and it helps you get sponsorship. But you realize once you get to the race, you've really done something spectacular. We'll start off with about 100 schools trying to get to the race this summer. We'll end up with about 45 filing an intent to race. About 35 will probably show up at the race. Not all of those will qualify. But those who are there realize, I'm a winner because I made it. Look at what I've done already. I built a car. I raised enough money to be here. I talked to the community about this. I've done community outreach. We are winners. And so when you're working in the shop and something's not going right, and you say, oh my goodness, I don't have this particular tool, you can turn to the team next to you and say, you have to have this size wrench that we can borrow, and they'll loan it to you. Or if your motor controller goes out, another team says, I've got a spare motor controller, I'll loan it to you. Or if you show up with not enough people, they'll loan their kids to you. For instance, we had a team from North Tampa show up this year with 2 people on their team. We're thinking that most teams need to have at least 5. So we were able to get the captain of one of the solar car teams to jump in and help drive their car. We had 2 of the volunteers from other teams come and help join that team. They had 5 kids, 2 of their own, and 3 volunteers. That's cooperation. And when it's all over with, we're doing our final awards banquet discussions. One of the things I found is how intriguing it is to hear the kids talk about the thing that they value is a camaraderie, friendship, and collaboration they shared with other teams. It's huge. And it also doesn't make you feel alone. You've got other people there who will support you. So think about that. We are a cooperation, not competition. Well, where do we start? Well, let's start with team building. You've got to be able to put a team together. First thing is, how big a team should you have? Well, we grant each team 15 credentials to come to the race because we think that 15, which is about 12 or 13 kids and 2 or 3 advisors, is the right number to bring. One, the space, the garage bay you've got, that kind of limitation. But you think that not only do I have that many teams, but I've got to feed them and I've got to house them. So I have a team from Irvine, California, bring 60 people to a race. And the problem is when you put them, you know, they've got the same amount of space that a team of 5 people has. They've got all these people to feed, and it's just an incredibly difficult situation. So we provide you credentials for 15. Any more than that, and you will pay a penalty at team check-in for more than 15 in order to get credentials. So we're saying that sort of guideline. How big should the team be? I recommend at least 5 people if you can. And if you're thinking about maximum 15. Here's a team from Grosse Pointe. You want to have enough people on your team to do what it needs to be done. Actually, this is a picture of our team from 2003 doing the race across Australia. And our truck, which carried the crate, which housed the car, was so high up, we had to use ancient Egyptian principles of how to put logs underneath the car and lower it out of the truck. So you've got to have enough people to accomplish your task. That's what that picture's designed to show. You also want to develop a captaincy in your team. Somebody who your team members respect, somebody who the advisor respects, and the captain serves both as an extra set of eyes for the team advisor, but maybe more importantly, he's somebody that the advisor can go to and say, hey, captain, come go with me. We have a potential to talk to a sponsor. Come go represent the team. Somebody who will represent the team. So think about developing a captaincy. Probably you were a captain. What was it like? Would you want to stand up and tell what it was like being a captain? I'll make you earn your livelihood here. Oh, no, I was kidding you.
Hi guys, my name's Paulo. I was part of the Eagle Eye Innovators team 2 years ago, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, 2 years ago, and then last year I had to take a break from most of the teams. And now I'm back with a new team, the Sunshine School. And being a team captain, I wouldn't say it's a lot of times what I think happens when people hear about team captains, they think, oh, it's someone that's taking over. It's someone that's like gathering all on one person. They're getting power. But as a team captain now and before, I can tell you that being a team captain doesn't mean that you have power. It means that you are the voice of the team to any situation. So, for example, we had many experiences where our team would maybe not agree with what our advisor would. And it wouldn't be anything big, but it would be something like, he would be like, hey, what if we did this? And we'd be like, but this fundraiser seems to have better. And the team would come talk to me, and I would talk to the advisor. And a lot of times, being a team captain and advisor work so closely together that the line blurs between being a mentor and a kid. You just start working together all the time. It's where you're always there. And also, you get to make so many friends with your team. I can tell you the night that I slept in the garage bed of our workshop, we didn't have air conditioning or heater. And I was running battery capacity tests on the car to make sure that our capacity battery was working throughout an extended period of time. And I was like, team, go home, you don't need for us. But as team captain and my mentor, we were like, okay, we're gonna stay here and we're just gonna speak for this time in a car. And being a team captain is all about the responsibility and helping. It's a great experience. I think it's also very important because there have been many times where everyone's super chaotic, they don't know what's going on. And then having a team captain as like a focus point and that can help charge all of that energy that as high school students have to building is one point. It's an incredible.
Thank you very much. You are a great speaker. Thank you for sharing so much. I appreciate that. You want to make sure that your team and your parents are vested in the project. Now, I've seen all kinds of different things, but at the very beginning of the year, you need to have a parent meeting with your kids and talking about what you're going to do. You need to educate your parents. They need to be involved in it. They can become a booster club for you. One of the best times we ever would have was we meet on the weekends. The teams would be there. Parents would bring in food so we could eat around a table. And being able to share a meal with your team members was a huge thing. But that was only because the parents were involved in this. The reason why you need to be vested is every year there is some team that comes up and says, but we didn't know we had to do this in the summer. Or our vacation plans conflict with when the race is going to be. You know when the race is going to be. We announce it in September. So you as a team advisor or as a team member need to be making your parents aware that for that period of time, you know, let's not plan to go to Hawaii or to Colorado or to Corpus Christi or whatever you're going to do that summer because I need to be involved in it. We had teams that lost half their members and had to go race with only half the team because they didn't do this. They didn't vest people in the project. And you do that early in the year. If parents come in, you ought to have parent nights several times during the year so they can come in and see your progress. Hopefully it's progress, but see what you're doing. Let the kids talk to them. Share with them the excitement they're building. Because if you can get the parents excited about this, you've got one of the best resources in the world. By the way, this is very sentimental because I think you will see a number of people who've taken part in some of our staff in here, including you, Christian, your team that took part in this.
I think one of the most interesting things I saw done about investing is a teacher who ran 3 separate solar car teams was that she had a contract that she, the kid, and the parents had to sign, which set out what the school was going to do for the kid and what the parents were going to do for the team. So that at the very beginning of the year, everybody knew what was happening. Knowledge is important. Don't let something slip up on the parents. I'm sure that that point would come obviously. Take advantage of learning opportunities. I am so glad you're here. You're going to hear some marvelous presentations. We do this in our first workshop to give you sort of a skim off the top presentation. We're going to give you some basic mechanical engineering, some basic electrical. We're going to talk about communications. We're going to talk about sort of what a solar car cross-country race is going to be. We're going to talk about rules. But right now, you really don't know the questions you need to be asking. By the time you leap into this, come January, you're going to know a whole lot more questions you want to ask. So we do an intensive workshop Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday in January, where we do in-depth mechanical engineering, in-depth electrical engineering, in-depth aeronautics, all these kind of things, because that's when you really know the things that you need to be doing. Read the rules. Take time to read the rules. You can't read it all in one course unless you want to put everybody to sleep. But you need to know the rules. Don't do what a kid did to me. Kid wrote me and he said, "Doc, which rules are you going to enforce?" Let me tell you, we enforce every rule to the penny there, because these rules are designed to protect you, to deal with your safety, and to make sure that everybody's on the same level playing field. Judges will not give you a break. You have to follow the rules. Do not show up and say, "Well, we didn't understand it that way." Well, what do? You write me. You send me an email. You say, "Doc, we're reading the rule this way. Do we have the right interpretation?" I had one school with one kid from that team write me 27 times last year. 27 times. And I answered every one. Write me. That's what I do to help support you. If you have a question, ask in advance. That way you don't end up coming to scrutiny and find out, no, your interpretation of the rule is not the right one to go. Read the rules. Have a set of rules in your workshop here. And also be a fundraiser. Everybody needs to go out and raise money in this. Why? Because that best you in this. If you raise money for the project, it's your project. The only time I've had a team completely fail was a team from San Antonio. The school paid for everything. When it came to the race in the summer, the kids didn't show up. Why? They weren't vested in it. They didn't raise any money. So you want to have a chance to support your team, because if you worked to pay for the money to buy that drill, then if that drill is lost, you feel the pain. You want to make sure you raise some money so the car is not working. You feel the obligation to try to fix it. So be a part of the fundraising on this. It's your car. It's your project. We already talked about the importance of building skills. It's a huge part of what we do here. The importance of goal setting is maybe more than anything else. If you're going to have a firm place to work, by the way, my first team never had a firm place to work. We would take stuff out in the hallway in the school, work in the hallway. At the end of the class period, we take it back into my classroom. Man, that was tough. That meant that in a 50-minute period, we have about 30 minutes to actually work. But when we finally got a place to work, we had a giant timeline that went across there. We visualized what we needed to do. We spread out what we needed to do. And we broke every task up into specific little jobs. And there's something really powerful when you accomplish a job, which was assigned to Bill and to Fred and to Mary. You were able to cross it off. There's a sense of accomplishment there. So I highly recommend you visualize your plan. Here's a pretty good plan for how you should develop this. First off, in September, you should be coming up with a plan and design for your car, what you're thinking about. Research it. Get in there. Make decisions that you're going to hold to. You don't want to get 2 months down the road and work and find that, oh my gosh, I don't like this anymore. I need to come up with a whole new car. Think of how much time you've lost. Start at the beginning, planning and designing. By early October, you need to be developing promotional materials about your project. A handout that you could go give to the Chamber of Commerce. A document that you give to your principal or your leader or to somebody in your community that says what you're going to do. Something that represents you. That should include a design, or you've got an old car, show an old car. That's a value of having done this. There's nothing better to raise money than showing a picture of your old car and saying, here's what we did, here's what we want to do. Won't you help us get there? That's huge. If you've not built a car before, you said, here's our plan. Here's our dream. Would you help us get there? And you need something to show them. That's a plan. That's maybe a drawing. That's maybe a financial budget. Why do you do this? Because every company or organization you go to has had that year 100 people come in and ask for money. And they have to evaluate who they're going to give money to. If you show you're prepared, if you show that you've got a plan, if you show that you have looked at the finances behind this, then you have a better chance of being able to get that funded. If you've got a team that can go shake hands with these people, look them in the eye, and say a few words. My first team was with a school that had learning differences. They couldn't memorize anything. They had great difficulty with it. I remember one summer we tried to develop a presentation with each team member would memorize about 4 or 5 lines. It was just not what they're going to do. They had to do things contemporaneously at the time, ad lib, whatever it was. We practiced over and over and over again. And the best way we decided to do it was with that 7 members. We had one team member learn one idea, 1 or 2 lines. Another member who learned another 2 lines. Another member who learned another 2 lines, so on. So you end up somebody say, hi, we're the Winston Solar Car team. Here's who we are. Second one was, hi, here's what our plan is. Hi, here's our budget. Hi, here's our dream. Here's what our project look like. You put it all together and shazam, you got a presentation. And it's organized. And that garners huge amount of success from the people who are there looking at what you're doing. So then you do your fundraising by the time you get to October. November, you're going to think about buying, starting to buy what you need. Some people say, well, why don't you provide a kit? That's part of the education process. Every team gets to decide what they want to use in building the car and what their car is going to look like within the framework of the rules. The rules provide guidelines as to the size of the roll bar, or the importance of crush zones, or what a safety cell is like, or how long the car has got to be. It'll set up guidelines for that. But you need to be able to start thinking about buying things for it. The reason I say that, if you're going to buy a motor or solar cells, sometimes it takes a couple of months for it to get here. You buy solar cells from China. It may take you 2 or 3 months for that solar cell to get here. So if you wait till May to buy it, you may not have solar cells on your car. So it's important to make sure that you're thinking about materials, technology, what you're going to use. And if you are a new team, then if you'll see me at lunchtime, I have a little preliminary budget that the Greenville ISD solar car, called the Iron Lions, developed, that shows what their budget was and what they bought on it. Not only that, but we provided you a list of suppliers here where you can find materials. That's a huge thing. But you decide what you're going to do on that. You need to make that decision yourself. You start building in December to March. Right in that middle part there, we do the January workshop, so that as you're starting to build, we're here to help you. That's why we do that 3-day workshop. then whatever you do, you need to be built by April, early May, so that if you see if it doesn't work, you have enough time to rebuild. But the most important part is when you get to the end of May into June. June is when you need to test the car. The only time I see the year after year that a car fails when they get to scrutiny is they never put the car on the road. They never took it on the track anywhere. They never drove it around their parking lot. They waited to get to the race and it broke. You don't want that to happen. You want the car to break in the parking lot of your school or along your neighborhood street so you can quietly take it home and fix it. Our guideline is before you get to the race, put 500 miles in the car. Now I say that, I know people won't do that, but you can put 300. You can put 200 on that, and you can find out does your car work? Does the turning work? And also, by the time we get to January, we'll be providing you with the scrutineering booklets, which asks every question we're going to ask you in order for you to qualify. You'll know all the questions in advance. What a rigged deal. You know the questions. All you have to do is make sure your car complies and you know the answer. So we help you be able to get through scrutineering that way. Then after the race is over with, you need to do post-analytics. Write down what worked. Write down what didn't work so that the new team coming in will have that information. That's the worst thing. Y'all have a tendency of graduating. Shame on you. You graduate and all that knowledge is lost. Don't do what I did with my first team. My first team had 6 seniors and 1 junior, and how dare they graduate. And so we're starting the next year with a team that had 1 experienced junior, now a senior, and all these freshmen and sophomores didn't know anything. Don't do that. Get on your team, seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen if you can. Let them get involved in this. Okay. The importance of testing that I'm talking about. I just mentioned this. Post-race evaluation is important. And the thing that I found that was maybe more important than anything was making sure that you and the team members spend time with each other and you have fun. I used to always take my team to Big Bend. We do campouts there, geology hunts. We go to Fort Davis and visit the McDonald's Observatory, or we just camp out in Glen Rose, or we would do different things where we would enjoy being together. Because when you're doing racing, or when you're doing building, people get on each other's nerves. And you've got to have some good times to counterbalance the bad times. You've got to have friendships that will hold you together when the car doesn't work. That's huge. And I recommend that when you do have your meetings that you have the old type of sit down and have dinner together. I really recommend this because if you can sit down and have a meal with your fellow teammates, after particularly you've spent an afternoon working, then if people have raw feelings, you can share those nicely across the table, not throw a piece of pizza at them. It's a neat thing. Share that conviviality. Why the Solar Car Challenge? Because every high school group needs a top project-based STEM learning project. And this by far is the most involved. Is it working? Yes, it does. Here are some of the stats. 75% have finished college and earned a degree in STEM. These are participants who took part in the Solar Car Challenge. 71% earned degrees in engineering. 92% of participants currently in college are pursuing a STEM degree. 22% of those are doing things in alternative energy. 69% have used solar in some kind of aspect of their life other than the race. 100% was satisfied with their experience. 88% said participation in the Solar Car Challenge influenced their college major. And 94% said participation in the Solar Car Challenge influenced their career. These are fantastic statistics. But it means that what we're doing here is helping you. Not only that, it's a great credential to help you in the college that you want to get to, or just in life, or knowing the work skills you do. whatever it is. Even if you don't go into engineering, the things you learn about teamwork will help you more than you could possibly imagine in any kind of job it is. When we did the race this summer, I was stunned by the number of people who observed what we were doing. With all the print media, social media, and all the TV, all across the country and around the world, there were 1 billion viewers of what we do. 1 billion. It's stunning. This coming from our PR company, Southwest Communications. I had one guy call me and said, at least 100 million must have been for me, because I was tuning in every day. This is what we want you to look like when you finish. You want to have that kind of excitement, and I think you will. Now, I need to show you something exciting. I need you to have a chance to come out and see the Covenant Solar Car team, its car, and, you know, warning, we need to stretch. So if you'll go out the door here and go to the left and go exit outside, Scott's going to show you the solar car there, give you a chance to spend a couple of minutes to look at it, and then come on back in, and we're going to be talking about the importance of team communication. So let's get up and stretch our legs. We have coffee in the back there, and maybe some donuts left. Thank you very much. We're going to take a break from our feed.
We're about my name is Sean, and we're two tackles this year, and we're the two training things.
Thank you for being here. How about Angela from Harmony School of Integration in Fort Worth?
Hi, again, I'm Angela Jeffers from Harmony School of Integration in Fort Worth, and this is my first year. I've got 2 years in 2 years.
We're so glad to have you. Thank you very much. Monica Wood is starting a team. Monica, you want to introduce yourself or say?
I'm Blake Wood. I'm starting this year. I'm still working on it, but another team captain will share up later. So
We're glad to have you. Thank you. And I have a projected budget if you'd like to get one. You can sort of get an idea of things. Justin, we just met outside. Come introduce yourself and your team. Thank you. Appreciate you coming. Kevin. Glad to have you back. Great thing. They are composed of students from several different districts. And so that offers many opportunities. Monica, you might want to talk to Kevin in one here. David with the Round Top Carmine School, a new school taking part in this. Glad to have you here. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it very much. Christy, tell us about your team. Christy Williams.
He's been around since 2005, so we've been keeping up the program. This is my team this year.
I
We're excited for this year's race. It'll be my first cross country race, mainly based on track. So I'm excited for that cross country race. And just for all Texas.
We're glad to have all of you here. As a matter of fact, we're hoping to come through Round Rock through our cross-country race. Probably you want to introduce your team.
I am the vice captain.
Glad to have you. Thank you very much. We're excited to be here. Capel, are you here? Capel. Yes, glad to see y'all. Okay. So we know who's going to be doing the work, right? The guy in between. Okay, we're glad to have you. Besides that, we are doing a feed to several other areas around the world. We are privileged to have Luis Noriega from the Aguascalientes, Mexico, who is starting a team there, and they hope to be participating with us. And Joanna from the second high school attached to the Beijing National University. They observed this past summer. They're going to be observing this coming summer, and they're planning to race with us in 2027. We also have some teams from the Middle East that are observing us. So it's not just us, it's other people around the world. Why? Because they understand what this program would do. And the person who's going to tell you about that, the man who's the #1 communicator, is Christian Negratti. He's going to talk about the value of communication.
Thank you, Dr. Marks. I did. So the importance of team communication. First off, let's start off with how you should start almost every communicating interaction. You know, you got to identify who you are. So a little bit about me. My name is Christian Negratti. The solar car I raced back in 2013. I've been back on staff every year since. I ended up going to college at Oklahoma State University, where I graduated in 2018 with my mechanical engineering degree. I'm currently a senior mechanical engineer, specializing in rotating equipment reliability in the energy industry. It's a pretty good time. So communication. Communication is defined as the exchanging of information or news. Why is it important? Because without communication, you can't get much done. You always got to be able to talk to each other, communicate internally in your team and to the outside world with others. Like Doc mentioned, especially when you're going out asking for money, if you are not good at communicating, people don't necessarily want to give you money. But if you can explain to them why you want their money and what you're going to do with it and how it'll help you and how it will improve the lives of everyone on your team, they're a lot more likely to help you out. So who's good at it? Anyone? Who do you think is normally good at communicating? Teachers, some people say politicians, news anchors, they're all really good at communicating, including Dr. Marks. He's one of the best communicators I think I've ever met. And then who's usually not good at it? Engineers. What are a lot of the solar car teams made of? Future engineers. See where this is going. There's a lot of times at races where we will have a few behind on there, where we'll have some teams come up and it honestly feels like we're pulling teeth to get them to talk to us. But then we have other teams that will arrive and they will talk your ear off and you gotta make up an excuse to get away from them. So one of the big things about communicating is finding that happy medium of being able to hold a conversation, maintain eye contact, and truly communicate about what you are and what you're doing. Why do people struggle with communication? Sometimes different communication styles. Some people talk with their hands. Some people prefer to text message and email instead of making a phone call. Sometimes there's different languages. Some people will use different slang with each other. And so sometimes just not using the same nomenclature will mess up a communication chain. Speaking with clarity, sometimes people enjoy mumbling and kind of talking down and like not necessarily projecting what they're saying. That's one big thing to work with everyone about keeping your chin up when you're talking to people. That's just one little thing that I was taught at a young age, and it seems to work out really well for me. Another is nerves or fear of judgment. You got to kind of get to a point where you realize that being bad at communicating is a lot less stressful than the communication going badly and resulting in problems later down the line. So a lot of times you really just got to kind of jump out in front of it and bite the bullet, so to speak, of not being the best at communicating, but taking the time to work through it to prevent future issues down the line. And then one of the biggest issues that engineers specifically face is explaining something that is very complex and technical to someone who doesn't understand the technical side. So one big thing you really got to do, especially when you're doing community outreach, is learn how to explain in simple words what you're doing without it sounding demeaning. I know that was one thing I really struggled with, is whenever I'd be explaining something very technical to people, it would kind of come off as talking down on them. I'm hoping I'm getting a lot better at it. To my knowledge, I haven't got hit in the face for it. So, so how do we communicate during the race? So, especially during a cross country race, you've got your lead car, your solar car, your chase 1, and your chase 2, and everyone has to stay in constant communication with everyone in the convoy. A lot of people use radios, whether it's FRS, GMRS, or ham radios. Ham radios are a great thing. If somebody in here have their ham license, I do. Anybody else? Yep, a handful. So one of the best things about ham radio is it's really easy to get licensed and get your community involved with you, because the one thing about ham radios is it's a bunch of people that enjoy talking about ham radio. So if you give them a chance to talk to younger kids about ham radio to get them involved, 9 times out of 10 they will jump on it. We were very fortunate when I raced back in 2013, where we ended up getting sponsored by our local ham club. They came in and a couple days they did classes and gave us study material. Then they came back a week later and we all tested and got our licenses. And then coming up on the race, they ended up providing us a bunch of handheld ham radios and even outfitted our 4 vehicles, including the solar car and our convoy, with mounted installed ham radios, which was really, really nice and supportive of them. Some teams have tried cell phones throughout the race. It's not really recommended. It can be unreliable, and if the phone call drops, then you don't have communication, and having a 4-way phone call going is just a pain. No one wants to do that. A couple of not recommended forms of communication: bird messengers. Birds get messy. Smoke signals, they take too much time, and they kind of, smoky. It's hard to breathe. And then cave drawings. There's no sun in caves, so the cars will not work there. So we will have to work on a few other forms of communication. Touching on ham radios again, I definitely forgot this slide was here when I elaborated more on ham radios. But like I said, it's a bunch of people who love ham radio, and 9 times out of 10, they'll be more than happy to be involved with your group and educate y'all and get y'all licensed up. And one of the big things that a lot of teams do struggle with whenever they do get their radios and everything all set up is to practice communicating. One big thing is to establish a chain of communication. So back in the day, feel really old saying that. When I raced, we had a couple of key communication positions. One of them was we had the driver communicator, as in the driver was in the car driving and only one person was on the same radio channel as them. It was usually the captain. So anything that needed to be communicated to the driver went through one person. That way it was very clarified and the driver only had to focus on driving and not the strategy debate, so to speak. Because if you have 4 people with radios trying to talk to one person at one time, it doesn't work well. Agree on some common terminology throughout the team. So whenever come up with just some basic phrases like, what is this power reading? And then come up with a phrase for the driver to respond with. For example, we always said for the voltage or any reading, you would say the value. So we're at 47 volts, 47. So you would say the number again after the units just to make sure that it was purely understood across the radio. And then another great, sorry, I hate to backtrack. Without how I mentioned having the driver communicator, it's also very important to have a staff communicator. We call them the liaison. So whenever, especially on cross country races, we send one member of our staff to ride along with y'all each day. And, it's one person with a group of 15 new people that they've never met before. So it's really important to have a liaison that speaks directly to them. So they have a single person to go to when there's an issue, a single point of contact for them to communicate everything through to the team. I know for us, that usually was one of our assistant captains. It just makes life a whole lot easier. Back to practicing. Get team members used to speaking on a radio. Has anybody in here used a radio before, like a walkie-talkie? Has anybody been frustrated with the person you're talking to on the other end of the radio because they're talking as they're pushing the button, so you miss that first bit of couple words? Keith, that was why we would always have them then repeat the number after, just because most of the time, and that way we wouldn't have to ask them to repeat it again. Also speaking slowly and clearly, you really have to practice talking in a way on the radio that people will understand. And then also, finally, you really need to practice using the radio in the car. You got to make sure that like push to talk on the radio is easily accessible. I've seen some teams that are that the driver's wearing a headset and the radio is like down here, and every time they're talking, they're having to reach down to hit the button. It's very, very inconvenient. I know we ended up rigging up a system where we ended up having the push to talk button on the steering wheel for them, and they're wearing a headset, and it worked out perfectly. The radio interface inside the car is always something that a lot of teams overlook, and there's always easier ways to do it. And then finally, this was an issue that kicked our butts up and down like 2 weeks before the race. Was we ended up having some really bad RF radio frequency interference between our motor and motor controller and the radios we were on. And in the end, our solution ended up being to just adjust the frequency we were using up like 2 or 3 steps, and all the radio interference was gone. But if we hadn't put in so much time and effort into practicing with our radios, we wouldn't have known that until the race. The first race day, we would have had a lot of issues. So communication is key. Most problems are not real problems, just communication issues. Even in my professional life, I can't tell you how many times that we end up with issues that you can trace it back to someone just didn't communicate properly. Practice makes perfect. Always ask for help. People can't help you if you don't ask. Be honest and open. Try not to get your feelings hurt easily, and understand that a lot of times you really have to understand this person you're communicating with. You have to understand their intention, because every now and then they may say something that might at face value offend you, but if you kind of look a little bit deeper, you'll realize that they weren't being mean, that they were just trying to communicate with you
very poorly. And then sometimes you just need to break the norm to get the point across. That is all.
Opportunity from Scott Sharp to talk to you about something we've never talked about before, which is how to establish your own standalone 501c3 nonprofit organization. Scott, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for showing us your solar card. You inspired a lot of people.
Absolutely, happy to help. All right, so we're going to do a topic that might put some of us to sleep, but I put it together from the perspective of the student as opposed to the adult mentor. So basically, we had a solar car team that I helped last year that's in Seattle. They had to start over from scratch and they had to form the 501c3 themselves. And the students actually stepped up and formed the 501c3, did all the research, got it done as opposed to the mentor. And they came back this year with an impressive showing, once again, from a car that was rebuilt from scratch. So why form a nonprofit outside of your school? So basically, sometimes schools push it out, so you lose support from the school. There's some issues where there is a little bit more control that, or restrictions or things that make it very, very difficult to have a solar car team and to produce the results that you really want to do with your solar car team. There's also restrictions on donations and how to get outside funds, because those outside funds from a donation perspective have to fund through the school. With forming your own, you are freed up quite significantly on some of those issues. There's also legal protections because you're going to be able to control exactly how your insurance policies are tailored to exactly what you're doing, as opposed to some blanket policy that's on the school that may or may not apply to what you're actually doing. So there's key requirements for forming a 501c3. Stepping back, each corporation or each entity is formed at the state level. And then at the state level, you have to turn around and apply to the federal level, the IRS, for the nonprofit status. Sometimes state levels, you've got to do it as well after you get back that status from the IRS. So in the state of Texas, it is one where you also have to file with the state of Texas for a nonprofit status. Easiest way to do that is to file a C Corp with your state. An S Corp is a different kind of corporation. It's generally for profit, where they distribute profits down to the actual shareholders. That doesn't apply for a 501c3 nonprofit because you're not distributing any profits to anyone. You're going to want to state your purpose, i.e. it's educational, it's scientific, it's an amateur sport, whatever way you want to do it. I have had limitations with the educational side because the IRS got confused as to what I was actually doing. They wanted clarity on I'm providing an educational process, but I'm not a school. So they kicked back my 501c3 status initially, and I had to rewrite the application to give a better description of what we're doing, and no, we're not a school. As I said, no profits to individuals. Where you cannot donate to politics, any political party. You cannot raise or lobby money for a political purpose. Doubt that's happening in any of the solar cars, but that's the limitation. You're going to want to choose and reserve your name. The easiest way in Texas is called SOS Direct. You can actually, anybody can go use it. It's designed like it's a company, but I signed up as an individual. I paid $1 to get into it, and I searched names. And what I wanted to do was create something as simple, make it very obvious what we're doing. So I reserved the name Solar Car Club. It also had a domain name that was available, solarcar.club. So it made it easy for me, but I went on SOS Direct just to make sure that it wasn't already reserved in the state of Texas. You're going to want to file your articles of incorporation. Easiest way to do that nowadays. I wrote mine from scratch, but I would go to ChatGPT nowadays and go, hey, I need articles of incorporation for the state of Texas, give my details and let it spit it out and just file it. You're going to designate a registered agent. A registered agent is in the instance you get a legal notice from the government, from a lawsuit, from whatever, that goes to your registered agent. It can be you. It doesn't have to be somebody separate. Lots of times there are law firms that are set up just to be your registered agent, but it costs you money. So if you want to limit that fee, just make it yourself. You also need 3 board members. So we have 3 board members that are also our president, secretary, and treasury of the corporation. So we kind of limited the number of people that were going to have some influence on what we were going to do, but you can have as many as you want. Lots of times your board members can also be very, very helpful when it comes to raising money. So they're motivated, they're on your board, they know what you're doing, and they can describe to the community and use their influence to help you raise funds. Okay, applying with the IRS. After you have filed your C Corp with the state of Texas, you take that same information and you apply it with the IRS to get an EIN, an employer identification number. No, you are not an employer. It is just a number. The purpose of that number is just to open a bank account. That's it. But just like we all have a social security number where we open a bank account with that social security number, the EIN is used to do the same thing. Choose your form. So the 1023 Easy is for any corporation that is not going to raise more than $50,000 a year and doesn't have, I believe it's 250,000 in total assets. So if your car, you have not put $250,000 worth of effort into it, then you're less than that threshold. So where the next is preparing a narrative of the program is where I got in trouble, where I confused the IRS and they were confused that I wasn't a school. Make sure it is very clear. You need budgets, you need bylaws, you need policies. If you prepare those ahead of time, it'll help you prepare your filing with the IRS itself. Then after that, just submit the application to pay.gov and you're good. You're good to go. It's, I believe, a $250 fee to do the filing. Both the applications, the easy or the long form, the same thing. After you get IRS approval, then you're going to get a determination letter from the IRS. The determination letter is very, very, very important. So everybody familiar with HEB grocery stores. So HEB is very, very big, so is Target, at giving donations in the local community. It's very simple to sign up with them, but they all require this determination letter. If you don't have it as proof to show to them, you're not getting anything from them. Then apply for the state for the same local tax exemptions. You'll have a form that you can use, and you just print it off the state's website that you fill in all your EIN information, you fill in what your company name is, and you carry it with you to prove that you are a nonprofit, even though you filled it out yourself and pulled it off the website. Open a bank account is the other, and make sure you're operating out of that bank account. Like Dr. Mark said, with create a budget financially, if you've got everything going in and out of that bank account, it makes it very, very easy to do your accounting and prove up exactly what you've spent and what your costs are. Governance and bylaws. So here's another really big one. We've got our bylaws include things like parent to student ratios. Who can be in the room with whom at any given time. What background checks anybody over the 18 is required to go through, and what kind of training that they are required to go through. Unfortunately, we use the exact same requirements that our original school had, which is Covenant Christian Academy. So we put all parents through basically pedophile training. And we require that same thing at our club level. We got conflicts of interest policies, who owns the assets, who owns what. So basically, if we have had issues where somebody said they were donating, well, their version of donation meant they were donating the asset for us to use for the year, and they wanted it back at the end of the year. So you want to be very, very clear with donations and who owns what. Insurance, risk management. We've got a general liability policy. We do not have event insurance, basically because the Solar Car Challenge provides a provider for the event insurance. We just go through them for that. And it's a lot cheaper than I could find anywhere else anyway. We also have driver's insurance. We do not have directors and officers insurance because we're such a small group and we're watching it pretty closely anyway, but it is an option. It prevents your outside directors from liability in the instance something happens. We also have extensive waivers. So a waiver that protects you, basically your club, from any liability outside. If somebody gets hurt, then we basically have it in our waiver that you assume the liability for somebody getting hurt. Not that we aren't going to provide the protections to make sure that we don't protect the kids from getting hurt. It's just sometimes it's hard to watch somebody drilling through aluminum and their hand is on the other side of where they're drilling in. Fundraising. You need to track and issue receipts. Issuing receipts is very important to a lot of people, especially for that donation, because they want to get a tax exemption on their tax return the next year. If you fail to give the receipts and they don't get their exception, they're probably not going to donate to you next year. So you want to make sure that one's a pretty important one. You can apply for grants. You file your IRS Form 990 every year. The IRS Form 990 is basically where are you operating out of, what's your name, who are your directors, how much money you raised. That's it. Avoid prohibition, maintain prohibited activities and maintain status. That basically means don't donate to political parties and don't lobby for money from political parties. Other fundraising registration, you need to register with GuideStar. GuideStar is they basically pull the same information as your 990. It's what everybody uses to verify that you are a nonprofit. The biggest thing on here, that Benevity is one of our biggest fundraising sources every single year. You register with Benevity. It's benevity.com. You put a description of what you're doing, what your activity is. Basically, corporations go onto there to try to find people to give money to. I get about $500 a month off of Benevity itself. So, and I don't know any of the people. They have never asked me a question. They've never seen what we do. It's just they wanted a place to give to charity, so they chose me as one of their places. It's very simple to register and very simple to maintain. You basically go on once a year and fill out a questionnaire, and that's it. Suggested timelines. It's going to take months to get this done because there's nothing fast about the federal government. State is not too bad, but IRS, different story. So here's my suggested timeline. Organize, get your draft documents weeks 1 and 2, file your articles and get your EIN 3 and 4. For IRS application, finalize, get your bylaws, all of that done weeks 5 through 8, and then 9 through 12, you're waiting on the IRS for approval and you're prepping operations. So we, just to give it a decent perspective, we got delayed 3 months in our first year of operation where we were separate from the school. I got IRS approval and my letter a month and a half prior to the race. So we were sweating bullets on whether or not we were going to be able to participate or not because we couldn't get insurance until we were approved. So, resources. So, IRS.gov has got a lot of resources on taxes against status. Again, I'm going to suggest if you're going to do research on what is specific for your team, ChatGPT is amazing. I use it for everything, but there's also council of nonprofits. The council of nonprofits, so I actually got some cool templates. So it's a decent place to start as well. Your Secretary of State, that's where you'll find what forms to file. The back to council of nonprofits, templates, bylaws, conflict of interest policies, and waivers is where you'll find those. But questions, next steps. It's important to assign board roles. You don't want board members that are just sitting back. You want them actively participating. So it's important to turn around and say, this is what we expect of our board members. We expect you to go out and expect you to raise money and help raise money for the kids. Here's how much we actually expect every board member to raise. So set it at something like $1,000, and that's at least a decent start for them. Speaking of donations, all banks, and this is what I tell all of my kids, all banks in the nation are required to donate to local charities. It's called the Community Reinvestment Act. If you walk into a bank and ask for $250, you're going to get it. But if you walk into a bank and ask for 10 grand, you've got about a 50-50 shot of getting $5 grand. So if they are required to do it, they want to do it. When bank examiners come, they've got a whole packet to give to them to say, okay, here's what we did. So you're actually helping them out for asking for the donation. Back on topic. So draft your core documents, set your deadlines, track your progress. You can seek legal and tax advice. Again, ChatGPT, but go for it.
I'm sorry. I have a question.
Yep.
Can you speak about have an obligation to talk about?
It's at the corporate level, but they are required to donate anywhere they have a branch.
Each branch?
Yes. So the best ones, if you can look them up, the asset size of a bank. If your bank has something like 13 branches, they're generally under $1 billion in assets. They are going to give a lot more local than, say, like, for example, Frost Bank. They're huge. They're everywhere. They have a board that's just for donations that they go and pick who they're going to give to without you walking in the door. And normally all of their money is gone in January. So the bigger banks are a whole lot harder. The smaller banks are great. So if you, especially small town community, you know, like if you only have 5,000 people in your community, you've got one bank, okay, that bank is pretty much guaranteed, but don't stop there. Go to all the other banks in the surrounding communities, because if they've got customers in that where you operate as well, then they are also required to give. So go for it.
So they'll still want a termination letter and a receipt.
Correct. Yep. $10 billion.
Is this 501c3? You can carry money from 1 year to the next, right?
Oh yeah. Okay. And we always do. It's just you're not distributing profits to any individual.
So you can carry that's.
Yeah, you can carry it inside the company. You can make as much money as you want in donations and then carry it year to year. We always carry a cushion of about 10 grand every year, and that's our starting for the next year.
That's what.
Yeah.
Scott, I have a recommendation. You were talking about having a website. On that website, have a donation portal. Something like Mighty Cause, who will take 83% of what the donation is, but they will automatically send the receipt to the donor. And that takes a huge burden off of that.
Agreed. Also, Benevity, they take the burden of doing, sending the receipt to the customer, the donator as well.
I have a question for you. You said you did this, your kids started this, right? So when they graduate, how do you transfer the information to the board members or?
You have a new election of board members and you document it in the minutes of the corporation.
So the club can continue on, even if the parents can still change.
Absolutely. And should.
Do you teach a covenant or?
I'm actually a parent of 2 kids in Covenant.
Sean, an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
As I said, that was the first time we've had that presentation, but more and more teams are organizing themselves in that capacity. We have the privilege to visit with a young man by the name of Triton Shoup, who I first knew as a student when he was at the Winston School. Then he became captain of the Winston team. Then he became an intern with us. Then he became a staff member, and now he's a race chief technical officer. And he's going to talk to you about building a mechanical side of the silver car. Triton, yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. As Doc's already introduced, my name is Triton Shoup. I am the Chief Technical Director of the Silver Car Challenge. Prior to being part of the staff or director of Silver Car Challenge, I was part of the Winston Silver Car team from 2016 to 2020. Raced either at Texas Motor Speedway or cross country, like Palomar this year. That inspired me so much so, I decided to go get the degree in mechanical engineering at SMU, and now I'm doing a double master's in mechanical engineering along with an MBA. And now today I'm going to teach y'all a little mini course in mechanical engineering and how to construct and the materials and technology. And also to note, this isn't a catch-all for everything. Don't take what I'm presenting today as everything you need to know mechanically. Still go through, read all the mechanical aspects of the rule book. That is basically your holy Bible. Read it and read it. Now to get started, what are some mechanical aspects of the solar car? Just by a show of hands, anyone wants to give a guess? Yeah. Suspension, okay, that's a good one. Anyone? Yeah. Crushed stones, that's good. We'll talk about that today. It's on the back. Steering, yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit. Yeah. Okay, that's another one we'll talk about today. Yeah, those are all good examples, and we'll actually address most of those today. So this is kind of going to be our outline. So we'll go over materials, so like actually how we're going to material selection, because that's really critical as you need to design that and figure that out very quickly. Then we'll go over the safety cell, crush stones, and roll bars. And then we'll go over suspension and steering, and then finally wheels and brakes. So first of all, the most common material that's typically used by teams is either mild or carbon steel. And so with this, the pros are, it's really easy to work with. You can typically either use a MIG welder, TIG, or even a flux core welder. I personally prefer either a MIG or TIG because they're better welds than say a flux core, but you can do whatever. And it's also pretty inexpensive. It's about $450 a foot. It can be easily changed and modified. So if something breaks on the track or we ask you to change something up during engineering, you can change it. It's also readily available. So any hardware shop or any metal market will typically have the size or shape that you need. Like I said, it comes in large sizes and full thicknesses. However, the cons are it will rust over time. So if you're planning on using this frame for multiple years, you might want to consider painting it over, powder coating in some sort of way to preserve the frame. And also it's very heavy. A lot of our first year teams build tanks, essentially. They're either about 800 to 1,200 pounds, which is good. I'd rather as a first year team, you build a tank that's safe, and then slowly over time as you figure out how a solar car works to reduce that material or either make a new frame that's a little bit lighter. So at the end of the day, we prefer you making tanks as a first year car, and it's a great material for a lot of new teams. And then also chromoly steel. There's a couple teams that use it, but typically it is a little bit rarer material I see now. A lot of people are going still either steel or aluminum. The pros with it, it's basically like steel, but it's a lighter weight, and it's can be easily changed and modified, so it acts just as steel. It's a little bit more finicky, but generally pretty safe. And it can also be welded to mild steel. The cons are it's a little bit more expensive, about $7 a foot, and also the welding wire itself requires a different type of welding wire, and it's about $15 a pound. And also MIG can be used, but the preferred approach is typically TIG. Now, my personal favorite. And I have a love-hate relationship with aluminum because that's what my car frame was made of. And that's actually the frame pictured here. The pros with it, it's lightweight, very stiff for its weight ratio, and it's relatively cheap, about $5.50 a foot, a little bit more than steel, but still competitively similar. It's also very corrosion resistant. It still can corrode over time, but typically it takes a lot of years or a lot of exposure to the elements for it to start to corrode in the same fashion. However, the cons are that's the wrong. It's typically harder to weld, so typically TIG is what's preferred with it. But you can use MIG. Our team, we used MIG, but we had to use a spool gun. You can't just use a normal welding gun, as typically that's what the spool of the actual aluminum wire will break inside the gun, and then you've ruined the gun. So you have to use spool. And then it's generally tubular, but typically, so it makes it harder for you to actually get a weld with it perfectly. So you typically have to notch it to burn mount it essentially and get a better weld around it. Also, it needs more material to resist fatigue. Aluminum's again very strong for its weight ratio, but it does fatigue over time. So areas that you maybe welded 2 years ago that were great at the time will start fatiguing over time as aluminum likes to stretch, and eventually it just breaks on without really knowing what happened. And it also can be really difficult to repair, as aluminum has a really low melting point when you're welding it. So typically, if you're welding on, say, a piece of steel, you can keep that welding gun there for a while and it not burn a hole. Aluminum, you kind of need to move a little quick. So that's why it gets a little bit more difficult with aluminum, because it takes a little bit more skill to actually repair on the fly. Next one is, this is more for our advanced teams or more experienced teams. So it's carbon fiber or composites. So the pros with it, it's lightest and the stiffest, and it can be formed in any shape. So as you kind of see pictured here, we have a lot of unique shapes with carbon fiber. You also can get a lot of more aerodynamic shapes with it. However, the cons with it, it can be expensive. It normally is pretty expensive. And also it needs a lot of careful planning, as a lot of it is either laid down in molds that you have to carefully plan out ahead of time. And usually it's either a one-time job. So you either get it right the first time or you have to start all over. And also it's kind of a steep learning curve. So if you are planning to use it, I'd highly suggest reaching out to teams that have priorly used it, such as Greenville. Their entire cars are pretty much carbon fiber now. I know Seattle now is pretty much carbon fiber, and there's a couple other cars out there, so I'd highly suggest you go out there and reach out to them. And also, if something were to break on it, typically carbon fiber doesn't break often, but when it does, it is hard to repair, and typically you have to use some sort of resin or epoxy to even repair it. So it's kind of a hard thing to repair. Also, this is a big issue that we had last year in scrutineering, is that a lot of teams did use carbon fiber on their car as like body panels, and they didn't get the professional engineering certification if used on the safety cell or crush up. They used it as their body panel, but as the organization, if you think about it, the body panel is your crush up, and those teams were trying to argue those body panels and that whole body isn't your crush up. They would put in like weak little thin metal wires and that you can literally snap with your hands and consider that your crush up. Well, it became more of a safety hazard at that point, because if that hit the side of the car, those wires didn't jam into the driver. So those teams didn't get a failure to comply with that issue because they didn't get the proper certification and proper papers that we require for carbon fibers. So now we've gone over the materials. Let's talk about always the big issue at scrutineering is safety cell, crush ends, and roll bars. So with safety cell, it's the rigid protection to encompass the entire driver. There has to be a minimum outside diameter of 1.9 centimeters, and there has to be padding areas in contact with the driver. So we just expect to have foam padding if there's like a sharp corner or if there's a bar there, something that keeps the driver safe in case of a collision. And also there has to be a minimum 5 centimeter clearance for all drivers. This is always an issue every year, and it's really sad to tell a driver they can't drive their car because they designed their car too small for, say, all their drivers that fit in. So 5 centimeters is, I think, less than 2 inches, I think, basically, about 2 inches. your cars, you shouldn't be so competitive with your cars where you can't fit every single driver in it. It's 2 inches at the end of the day. That little bit doesn't gain you anything as a competitive advantage. Oh, crush zones. Crush zones are the structural component designed to collapse on impact. There has to be a minimum of 5 centimeter horizontal and a 30 centimeter vertical clearance to driver's lower torso and legs, and also the battery box now that we're including. This one is typically an issue where teams either over design it or don't design it enough, because we want it to crumble, but we don't want it to be so rigid where it's just an extension of the actual safety cell itself. So typically there's a medium ground where you want to use a little bit lighter material used, but still rigid enough where it can absorb an impact. And I'll show some examples of those a little bit. And then the roll bar. It protects the driver in the event of a rollover. So it's a continuous piece of metal, and there's a minimum of 5 centimeter clearance, and a minimum of outside diameter of 5 centimeters, and a minimum wall thickness based on material, and then welded into the structural frame. So as you can kind of see pictured there, it's all with all these roll bars, it's welded to the structural frame, and it's all continuous piece of metal. There's also a new note. Rule 5.2.2.2 has an exception on the roll bar thickness and diameter, and we will talk about that here now. So with roll bar rule 5.2.2.2, it is essentially that the roll bar must be sized to withstand a 5G vertical load without yielding, and based on the weight of the vehicle with the driver and all support equipment included. Teams must provide this calculation as part of their registration documentation. So we've gotten a lot of complaints, and typically we'll have like 3 or 4 teams every year that request a waiver for the roll bar dimension, because they keep complaining that we can't bend a continuous piece of metal at that size diameter for their cars. So we are allowing certain teams, if they want to show us the math, that their roll bar will support the weight of their car. And this year we are weighing every single car. So now we will know if your roll bar calculations were correct or not. And we will basically allow teams to go out there and be a little bit more advanced with their cars and the math that they use behind it. So essentially we're looking for the point at which, right before that little jump that you see, anything below that is fine. That's your yield point is at that peak right there that I have highlighted in the circle. Anything above that, you're no longer yielding, it's no longer elastic. So you want it to be at that point. And then for teams that don't want to do this, don't worry, you can still use the same old rules of the years prior. This is more for teams that want to maybe go out there and strive for a little bit more competitive advantage. If y'all are a new team, I highly suggest maybe not going with this rule immediately and maybe go for a second car or something along those lines. So I just want to go over some more roll bar examples. So as you kind of saw today with the Covenant's car, it's kind of, you can see that there's plenty of vertical clearance between the driver's head and the roll bar itself, and it's also a continuous piece. I also like the side view of this one where there's a side bracing on the other side, so it's not all just loads on the vertical. There won't be any deflection in case of a rollover. And also for note, cruiser division cars must have a roll bar per row of seats. So with your EVs where there's 2 drivers, you have 1 whole row bar covering them. Now you have to add a second row with it now. Also, just some more examples. A lot of people feel like when they talk about piece of roll bar, they always think of that far right example where it's really, really narrow and tight. You don't have to do it that way. You can really extend it out, kind of like with the other 2 photos where it's really far out and it's a gradual bend, or it's more of a squared off position that's a little bit easier to bend. Now, kind of going on crush zones. So crush zones must be designed to absorb the impact from collision, also protect the driver from side and rear collisions, and have a minimum of 15 centimeter of horizontal distance from all parts of the driver's body, and have a minimum 30 centimeter vertical distance that encompasses the driver's lower torso. This is also a new, there's no longer any waiver cars. I know there was a waiver for a lot of our old cars that raced, I think, in 2021. That waiver is no longer expired, so all cars now have to follow the size, there's certain size parameters now. And also with Rule 5.4.3D, the battery box must protect the crush zone, not in the crush zones, as we had a lot of teams interpret it, where they put the battery box in our crush zone, so whenever the car would be impacted on that side, the battery box would be hit and there'd be no safety area for the crush zone itself. And insufficient regards to this, certain amount of safety structure will result in disqualification from the race. So again, some more examples of it. As I'm a visual learner, I think it's best to see by examples of how teams have done it in the past. That is our example we have in the rule book. But then we have this other example of this one team. I think they forgot to do crush zones. They were a little mad at us, and so they were like making sure we visually saw that they had crush zones. So they made them lime green, and so that's a perfect example of a crush zone where it's a certain height and width out, and it protects the entire battery box section. Another good example from this past year's race. So this team actually made their crush zones out of foam. There's no rule saying our crush zones have to be made out of the metal of the actual frame itself. So this team used a high impact, that pink high impact foam, so that way they could shape it to any form they wanted to. And it was also pretty lightweight. And it was implemented really well. So whenever it was attached on the car, it was really seamlessly done. Also, the crush zone, as you can see there, in that kind of red circle, that battery box is completely protected by the crush zone, but it also gives ample space so if there were to be an impact, it absorbs the impact. Also, they made their crush zones removable, which is a good thing, but they had to be careful about it. As we had a couple teams last year have crush zones that were removable, but the mechanism that they had to make it removable wasn't very strong. They were using hose clamps. Hose clamps will not be allowed. This team used actual fasteners or bolt in, and that was a perfectly safe and viable option. So that way it made it easy for if they needed to work on the car or say pressure got broken, they needed to swap it out. It was an easy fix, and they were able to get back on the track in an easier, faster method. Again, just kind of more examples. So the crush zone structure, see pictured here with the arrow, it's a lighter material than the rest of the safety cell and the roll bar. So that way, in the case of impact, it would crumble, but it absorbs the impact. The roll bar is a continuous piece of metal and protects the driver in the event of a rollover. And the roll cage, it's rigid, and protection encompasses the entire driver. Another issue that we'll see sometimes is that with teams, they'll forget to add this member right here. Or they'll bring it in too narrow where it doesn't protect the driver's head. My general rule of thumb is that if, say, a frisbee or a watermelon can hit the driver in the head or something like that, it's not safe enough. So this team, what they did, they added this little protection area. So that way, nothing can necessarily get in there that's a big object and hit the driver. We don't necessarily care about the hands, but we care more about the head and torso and then down here. So just be careful when you put in different drivers. Their torsos and their heads might fit at different levels. So now I'll show you some good examples. Let me show you a non-ideal example. So this is an older car, so I can pick on a little bit more. But basically, if you look at the roll bar, it is welded in two places, but I doubt it complies with the thickness requirements or the diameter requirements. And then let's look at the crush zones. I would prefer a structure that's a little bit less rigid, and deflects it away from the driver. Also, it violates the 30 centimeter vertical distance required for all new cars and all cars going forward. As right now, is the crush zone that they have right now, it's more just continuation of the safety cell. And the safety cell itself, it's a good structural, it's a good structure. It's a good, decent size material. I would like the protection again with kind of this upper torso and head. There's nothing there really deflecting anything. And also, this may be more of a nitpick, but I have to see the car in person. I would just say, maybe add another cross beam there that just keeps any sort of obstacle from hitting the driver. Again, just crush zones, as I reiterated earlier, crush zones don't need to be made of metal. They can be made of any material that just deflects some sort of impact or anything like that. So now we've gone over safety cells, crush zones, and roll bars. Let's talk about suspension and steering. So there's typically three common types of front suspension in Solo Pro Challenge. First one being McPherson strut. This one's kind of uncommon and typically requires teams to kind of modify or make their own McPherson strut. And it's a lot more advanced teams that will go out and try to do this type of suspension because most of the time it's meant for cars, and typically you have to scale it down to actually work for a solo car. The next one being solid axles. There's still teams that still don't have any suspension on their car. Just know your driver and the car might not thank you eventually when you're going cross country and you hit a bunch of potholes or go through a lot of brick roads that Texas tends to have. So just know it might add more wear and tear on your driver and car. And then probably the most common one is the dual A-arm suspension. It's probably one of the easiest ways to modify and also adjust your suspension. So that way if you have a lot of toe and camber, you can easily adjust it. However, it's also one of those, it's so easy to modify, it's really easy to mess up too if you aren't paying attention. Because if you slightly get it off, your whole wheelbase is completely wrong. So when you're also looking at suspension, you want to, and suspension and just normal wheels and tires, you want to look at contact patch. So in an ideal setting, your contact patch would be as small as possible, because if you think about it, all your energy that your solar cells are generating is going down to your tires and getting reduced from friction. So as minimum amount of surface area as you can have, the better. So in reality, it's more, you get more of that oval shape, but ideally you want it as small as possible. So when you're looking for tires and all that stuff, you really don't want to be looking for something like this. That's my car, and those are like 6-inch wide tires off the UTV. They never popped, but they were horribly inefficient. And you look for something more like this that maybe use more like a moped tire or vice. Yes. It honestly didn't affect our stopping ability. We stopped on like a dime with our car. So like it does help your stopping ability, but almost it maybe stopped you too quick because you have so much rolling resistance on your car. But then something like this, you have a little bit better efficiency in terms of rolling. So like we would spin our tire here without free rolling, it would maybe spin for 50 seconds. Where I know probably like Iron Lions over here, they can probably spin their tire, barely grace it, and spin it for 5-6 minutes without it stopping. So there's a lot that goes into that you take account for. Also steering axis. So I'll see a lot of teams when they come in, especially new teams, they don't realize when they steal their spindle off, say, a Banshee, a Yamaha Banshee, or some other vehicle, that the spindle mounting axis, they don't put it in the right position. So that causes the tires to kind of go out like this, as you can kind of see with how our car was, and that makes an uneven wear track on those tires, and also adds added rolling resistance and wear and tear on those tires that they're not accustomed for. So just keep that in mind whenever you're mounting that spindle to make sure your tires is perpendicular to the road as possible. So here's some steering geometries, all the kind of different terms and lingos. For the sake of time, I won't necessarily go over every one, and also I want all of y'all to go out there and really learn it yourselves, as I feel like this 45-minute presentation isn't going to teach y'all enough to know exactly what y'all need to do. But just know that these components really do determine a really, really efficient team from a low efficient team, typically. And then acronym steering. So this is a steering system that most teams will typically use. Again, I won't cover it in super big detail, but the importance in it avoids tire slips sideways when following the path around a curve at lower speeds. However, there are disadvantages. It typically doesn't come into effect with a lot of solar cars because the disadvantages come into play whenever it's really high speeds. But it typically neglects centrifugal force generated and countered by cornering force acting on each tire. This causes flexible tires to generate increased slip angle at higher speeds. So just kind of know that if you're planning to go higher speed, maybe looking for something a little bit different, but generally for most solar cars, Ackerman is perfectly fine. So now that we've got all that done, let's talk about wheels and brakes. And this is typically one of the harder parts to resource for some reason. So, and it might just be the fact that we're dealing with something that wants as low as drag and highest efficiency as possible. And there's not many things out there that really take that into consideration. So there's a ton of choices out there, but again, it needs to be done pretty early in the design process, whether determining if you want to go with 3-wheel design or a 4-wheel design. So the cars pictured here are 3-wheel designs. These cars typically are a little bit lighter. They're also easier to align, as you really only have to align the back wheel with the 2 front wheels, and also are typically less expensive. But I don't know if that holds true so much because a lot of teams will steal the rear end off a like an electric motorcycle or something. So that cost can kind of add up, or if they go into hub motors, it can kind of be the same as a 4-wheel design. And it's typically not as safe. And what I mean by that is that if, say, you have a blowout with one tire, or say suspension air brakes on you, you can't really keep going with only 2 wheels. Where, say, a 4-wheel car, you can kind of still get back either on a shoulder of a road, or you can still kind of limp back to the control or pit area at least. And again, it's kind of for more 4-wheel design. So our car was 4-wheel design, and all the cruisers have to be a 4-wheel design just because the load of the vehicle is too much for it to be a 3-wheel design. So that's a requirement for all cruisers. But with 4-wheel designs, there's typically more parts, which means higher cost and harder to get alignment correctly because now you have to worry about 2 rows of wheels And then the weight distribution is also less critical as now you're dividing it between 4 wheels. It's also a little bit much safer, as I said, in case of the flat. And the last one, this one's more critical for maybe cross-country races that you can straddle dead animals on the road. As with the 3-wheel design, your driver might just have to kind of take it, unfortunately, where 4-wheel design, you can kind of maneuver around it still. So now going to actually rims, wheels. The wheel choice must be able to handle the weight of the solo car and amount of forces turning. So MGM wheels, these are typically used on like the World Solar Car Challenge wheels. They are a little bit hard to come by at this point. I know generally whenever the tires themselves are hard to come by. The rims are fine. But typically when the World Solar Car Challenge comes around, they typically start making them again. So that's maybe a time to look for them. And then motorcycles, a lot of people use those. Junior dragster, that's been a more popular one. And mopeds too. Bicycles teams use, I highly discourage against bicycles, and I'll get into that a little bit. And ATV and UTV, that's what our team used, but I maybe try to find a thinner tire that you can. So again, just some more rim choices that are pictured here. In the center is more of a junior dragster, maybe a moped tire, and then our right one is more of a UTV tire. And finally is bicycle spoke tires. I highly discourage you from using spoke tires. The choice is for y'all to determine what type of spoke tire, type of brand of tires y'all want to use. But as a challenge overall, we highly discourage it because spoke tires are not meant for that type of weight typically. As we had last year, we had a cruiser team, they used spoke tires. They were able not to race for basically the entire race because their spokes kept falling out of their car out of the rims because it was not rated for that and they were shearing off. So, and there's typically at least 1 or 2 cars every year during the slalom where you're going at high speeds with the tire, and as you're turning in and out, typically a rim will fail. So just keep that in mind when you're going through the selection. I'd highly avoid spokes, and the other options are all pretty good options, I think. And then now going into brakes. So again, this is kind of where a lot of your efficiency will actually get determined for a lot of our advanced teams, a lot more, veteran teams, you could say. They will typically try to find ways to optimize this in some sort of fashion. So solo cars must have 2 independent braking systems that allow the driver to stop the vehicles safely and quickly. And cars have to use hydraulic disc brakes. They don't have to use hydraulic. Most cars use hydraulic disc brakes. There are a couple that will use cable brakes, but hydraulics are the more common one. A lot of teams either get their brakes off like ATV brakes or even some motorcycle ones. The ATV ones are typically pretty cheap and they fit standard spindles, but there's a lot of friction with those. As an ATV is not really worried about efficiency, and those typically like to drag a lot. Another common option are the MCP brakes. They're really nice because you're able to, the MCP ones are right here. You're able to put spacers in between it, so you're able to space it out where it's not constantly dragging on your brake rotor. And they're also just really good in that fashion. They also can stop those cars pretty quickly too. However, they can get a little expensive for like the nicer, higher end ones or the little bit bigger ones if you need them for the amount of weight of your car. So now getting to brake pedals. So the brake pedals must be independent. So pedals, master cylinders, etc., separate from each system, so you can't link anything. They can't be linked together, so we don't want it to be where if you press one, it presses both down. That's not allowed. We want it to be more of an automotive style pedal like this. And all pedals must be operated by foot, no hand brakes or anything like that. Also, like I said, no automotive style. So we don't want like this bar here with grip tape. We want it to be this flat plate, so that way when you press down on it, it's safe. Also, this is a side note, this is more of an electrical thing, but it's something we do test in mechanical. The brake light must be independent from the turn and hazard lights. So essentially, if you can press the brake light and you turn on the hazard, you don't want the hazards to override the brake lights or vice versa. We want them to be on at the same time and there be a difference between each one that's a clear difference. Also, another thing that happened this last year is we had a team manually clicking their hazard light, which is a no. So don't do that. That is a rule now. So going on to brakes, this is typically an area that teams do struggle with. And don't feel bad if you struggle with it. It's normally a pretty common thing for teams to struggle with it, say their first or even second year into it. At the brake station, we have 2 tests, the static. This is to test the strength of the car brakes at rest. So essentially, they'll ask your entire team they'll ask the driver to slam on his brakes at rest, and they'll ask the rest of the team to shove the car. If it doesn't move, great, you pass. And then the dynamic test is test how fast the brakes stop the car. So we'll basically ask your driver to drive as fast as possible, or up to I think 25, and they have to brake in a certain time frame. And if they pass that and they stop in the time frame, they pass. Great. As I said, many teams have brake problems. There's typically at least 2 or 3 teams that have to end up bleeding their brakes every year at scrutineering, but it's okay. A lot of teams do have that issue. Tips for this: test before arriving at the event. We give y'all the scrutineering booklet. Y'all can set up a mock scrutineering pretty easily and test this brake test to make sure you know how your car is going to perform. So now going into more the cruiser updates for this year. As we've had to update cruiser, with it being our newest division, we're constantly updating things with it to kind of properly align it how we're expecting the cruisers to end up looking like. So with this year, we added rule 33.2.3 C. The doors shall not be latched shut. Doors shall be latched shut when the vehicle is in motion and shall be unlatched for passenger entry and exit. So we've had an issue of a lot of teams where they don't have any doors per se, as the cruisers are meant to simulate real cars in the real world. We want it to have actual like doors and look like an actual car. So a lot of cars have been just having bare openings where the drivers just get out and then that's all it is. So now we're not allowing that anymore. We are requiring some sort of door that latching maintenance to be on the doorway entry and exit. And then second rule is the solar car array must not be overhanging the cruiser division body nor supported by struts. So essentially, this example here is how we want kind of cruisers to look, as it's a seamless look and it doesn't look like there's any struts hanging over it. It's all incorporated into the body itself, where it looks like a car that, say, you would drive in. And also, it's kind of a good picture of doors that we were kind of looking for, door mechanisms we're looking for. So I also wanted to end on tips for scrutineering, or tips for success in scrutineering. As someone with my first year being on a solo car team, we finished with 15 minutes left on the 3rd day. And with me not wanting to experience that ever again, I followed these kind of same strategies the following year, and we actually ended up finishing scrutineering on the 2nd day in the morning as the third or second team to finish scrutineering. So to go from that, it shows that even as a new team, you can pass scrutineering on the 2nd or 1st day. It just takes a lot of work and time to get there. So the first thing is read the book. And my second thing is read it again. The rule book is your Bible. Read it every couple months just to make sure you're up to date on the rules. If you read the book and follow every single thing, you will pass scrutineering with flying colors. Second thing, look at the scrutineering book on the website. It's there. It might not be the most up-to-date one, but we'll probably update it probably in a couple months or so. But okay. But when that comes out, look through it to see what you're going to be tested on. Because think of it as an open book test. So the catch is the review we give you are the actual test answers that we're going to be testing you on. But we only accept the 99 to 100% on the test to be entered into the race. And then as you go, so I'm suggesting either as a captain or advisor or your leads, go through the car with the booklet and check to see if it will pass inspection. I would like to say 2 to 3 weeks before going to the race. My team was never that ahead of schedule. Typically, we were like a week ahead of schedule, like a week before the race, and we were like, okay, will this pass or not? But let's be optimistic and hope that give yourself 2 to 3 weeks. That way, if you don't see something that's not going to pass, at least you can attempt to fix it before you show up to scrutineering. And if you don't have time, still go through the booklet and make sure you bring as many tools and parts that you possibly can think of. We brought our entire shop whenever we went to scrutineering. We were fortunate enough that we were close enough. We had a large enough trailer where we could bring our shop with us. Because a lot of teams will make the mistake of not bringing enough parts. So whenever they have something to fix at scrutineering, they then have to scramble for half a day or a full day, just scrambling for the parts they need to work on their car. Or if they already have the parts there allocated towards them, they can fix it right there on the spot and hopefully get signed off the same day. And then lastly, this is something that always gets reiterated at the beginning of team check-in, and typically will get reiterated probably in January again too, is that do station 1 on day 1. Even if you know you're not going to get a single thing checked off, go there. just because that way have a checklist of things to go through and do, and it'll save you so much more time in the long run. Because ideally, if say you go through station 1 and 2 and you get another station done, you have that entire day, second day, to go through and fix all those checklist items. So that way, day 3, hopefully all it is just sign offs, and then you're done. And with that, that's all I have, and I look forward to seeing everyone's cars at this year's.
All right. So next up, we've got Will Jones, who's prepared a quick and little presentation over his Cannonball Sun project, right? Or is this over Michigan? Or is it a combination?
I'm gonna talk about my most recent adventure in Australia at the One Solar Challenge.
That was it.
And I brought personal project, personal car I built, and we'll it's outside, kind of walk through like design, philosophy, timeline,
Yeah, one thing about Will is he is the epitome of a solar car kid. He shows the most love and passion for solar car from anyone I've ever met. He started a team, went to college, raced on the college team, and then in his free time built another solar car with him and a couple of his buddies to drive across the country. So if you ever need any help or any questions, he's definitely the man to go to. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Before we jump into it, why doesn't everyone just stand up, arms above the head, stretch out for a minute here. Everyone stand up. There we go. Get a little blood flowing. I can see the energies beginning to potentially lower. Not that that would ever happen. All right, sit down. Christian, thanks for the introduction. Like Christian said, I founded a team in 2017. Actually, we tried to race in 2018. We couldn't quite get the car together, but we raced in 2019 in the Classic Division of Okemos High School. And we had a great time, and I've sort of been addicted ever since. I don't know what better word to use, unfortunately, with solar cars and engineering and all that. I graduated that year, 2019, went on to University of Michigan. I've been a part of the University of Michigan team for just about my whole college tenure. I was in 2023 the team's project manager, team leader, team captain, whatever you want to call it, for World Solar Challenge. And we had a great run. We built a beautiful car. That year we finished 4th in the world, which was awesome. The following summer, I built another car to drive from New York to Los Angeles. Cannonball Sun is what we call it. So we set a record. No one had ever done it. No one's done it since. So maybe that says something about what a good idea it was or lack thereof. But we had a great time and drove across the country. It took us about 2 weeks to drive from New York to Los Angeles, and it ended up being somewhere around 3,200 miles all in. It's all back roads. And currently, I'm a full-time engineer at SpaceX. I graduated in May, and I started in July. But before I took the job, I managed to negotiate with my manager. I said, "This is awesome, but I have to go here to the World Solar Challenge." So I was just at the World Solar Challenge. It took place at the end of August. It was an awesome experience. It always is. For those who don't know, you race from Darwin to Adelaide. It's 3,000 kilometers through the outback in Australia. It's some of the most inhospitable conditions you could think of. Desert, hot. There's nothing out there. It's really just a road, and the folks around there to support it. So this shows the day before the race began. There's 34 teams, you name it, from just about every school in quite a few countries were represented. It all starts with the hot lap. You go under that arch, and the teams compete for the starting order. Whoever is able to drive around that track the fastest gets to start in position 1, and you go from there. So for us, we qualified in 8th place. Here we are. This is about 6 in the morning. The car's all bubble wrapped, ready to be transported to the start line. And for solace, and so everyone knows everything's not quite as smooth as you'd expect it to be. As we took it off the trailer, we all of a sudden heard a funny noise, went to spin one of the wheels, and there's some awful crunching. And basically, we had a piece of carbon fiber fender that was covering the wheel. Now wanted to contact the wheel or the inside of the wheel and tire. And so we just barely made it to the start line, but we were able to get off in that 8th position, and that was a relief because in 2023 we had also had issues during the hot lap, and so we started dead last. So we were feeling pretty good to have started in 8th place. And once you begin, it's sort of crazy. You drive for maybe somewhere between 30, 40 miles, and all of a sudden you're just out in the desert. There's nothing for miles and miles in any direction. You can see this is a pretty good picture here. This is a little deeper in the outback. But it's just wide open, beautiful country, beautiful solar car roads. You can drive from 8 in the morning until 5 p.m. And then, well, that didn't show up very well on the contrast, but there's 10 control stops between Darwin and Adelaide. And so what that turns out to be is about twice a day, you pull into one of these small towns that have like what they call roadhouses, which is a combination restaurant, pub, hotel, gas station, and caravan park. Lots of people will drive their campers and that kind of thing through the outback. So the reason they have those is you have an easy swap for your driver, but also so your gas vehicles can get gas. Now your solar car can drive all day, but your caravan vehicles, as you drive along with the solar car, of course, will need to be fueled up and that sort of thing. You can see there are 2 cars at a control stop from our competitors. Tokai, Japan, that was a top Dutch car from the Netherlands. So it's truly beautiful. You just camp on the side of the road. The stars at night, I'll show another picture here, are truly incredible. And so at 5 p.m., you have 10 minutes to find a spot to pull over, and you just find wherever the most convenient spot is. So the first day, we sort of lucked out. We ended at a control point. There was a nice caravan park or campsite. We were able to set up our tents and camp for the night. But the following 3 nights, we would literally just find wherever there seemed like a decent spot of dirt on the side of the road, or maybe there was a park pull off or something like that. And we set up our tents. And then, of course, like any solar car, we would be working late into the night, ensuring we were ready to go the next day for the race, the competition. And you can see there on the left next to our shipping container, and above that, just the stars at night as you look out, and what a truly great adventure it is. So this is shows here just more of the landscape and the scenery. For us, the overall race or competition or challenge, and they view it is certainly a race and a competition, but it's also a challenge. Not every team finished. I believe there were 34 teams who showed up to Darwin ready to race, and only 14 of them were able to get to the finish line, which shows just how challenging it is to get across the outback. So here the team is at the finish. We finished 7th overall in the world, which was a pretty awesome thing. To be able to say you're 7th in the world at anything is certainly an accomplishment. And just the fact that we were able to start in Darwin with our solar car and was able to drive 3,000 kilometers, 1,800 miles throughout the outback, powered solely on the energy of the sun, is really a sort of breathtaking kind of thing. And it took us about 4.5 days. We ran into some really quite challenging weather as we got into Adelaide. And at one point we had to, at Adelaide's at the finish line, we had to pull over and just pull a tarp over the car for about 30 minutes, and just absolutely pouring buckets of rain. The solar car was not necessarily waterproof. It could drive in the rain, but we were in a position where we thought it would be best to cover the car. Obviously our windshield wiper is non-existent, so that didn't make our driver very happy. The reason I think, and I don't see Doc here, but he asked me to talk about this, is just to show what great opportunities are possible if you stick with this solar car. You can take it to the college level and have this great adventure. I've had the opportunity to go on 2 great adventures now with the solar car team. And this past time I was more there on alumni support and design support, helping the team who really built and designed this past car Millennium in Australia. But both times I've been able to go on this adventure. It wasn't something I had to pay for myself. It was because I was a part of this team, and the team has this legacy, and I was able to do this. So I think for everyone in this room, I was once in your very shoes. Like, this is something you can be a part of. This is something you can look forward to, and this is something several universities go. It doesn't just have to be University of Michigan. You know, you could even help your university bring up a team, and even you know, Doc mentioned this, but the Iron Lions also high school team were in Australia this year. There are high school teams who have the possibility to go. So, you know, don't be afraid to dream big. And this is something that everyone here in this room can aspire to. So sort of second part, take a bit of a departure here, is I have my personal car out here. Like Christian said, I'm a bit of a solar car nut. I just want to introduce it and sort of give some details, and then we'll go look at it in person. This car I built, I guess, really the actual assembly, I'll show the dates here, but began in sort of the new year, approximately January of this year. And why did I do this? For fun, you know, drive to work. That isn't working out quite as well as I thought, because the road I work on is a little busier than would be the best, and the speed limit's a little faster for a solar car. You know, I do love solar cars, and I've built a lot of these cars at this point. I think this one was my fifth that I've truly like owned the development and build of. So like Christian said, if anyone has any questions, I'm always happy to help answer and provide feedback, design resource. I've seen a lot. I won't say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot of ways to do something the right way, and maybe not so much the right way. And so this car, you know, I wanted to sort of summarize everything I had learned into a vehicle. Where that all starts is like CAD in the computer aided design, and that was, you know, really like the design philosophy of this car was like the less handiwork and craftsmanship possible, the better, especially for me, where, you know, I'm a design engineer, and I can weld maybe okay. I don't have a ton of work, and the cars you'll see are some combination of you know, craftsmanship, engineering, and just extremely hard work, and trying to balance those and create the best product with the skills you have. And so this vehicle is like almost entirely CNC. When it was manufactured, you know, everything is either water jet, milled, turned, or some combination thereof, 3D printed. And you can see the areas where it's not. It's very clear where my craftsmanship ability or lack thereof is quite evident. But this shows the chassis, the aero body, and the final product. And then sort of on the internals, you can see the driver model I have with the chassis, the rear suspension, the front suspension on the left, and then the vehicle overlaid with the array on the top. And this is something I highly encourage of every single team, is putting as much as possible into the computer before you actually start going cutting and welding. And at the time, it can seem like, man, we really just want to, you know, get on the floor, start cutting, start welding, start putting stuff together. But when you really think of the whole cohesive product and all of, you know, not just, well, we need a chassis and we need an array and as these independent things, but as, you know, sort of one united structure that you're building, that's where you really begin to enter like the craftsmanship and engineering scene at the world stage. And you also save yourself time. You know, I think, well, man, if we don't start cutting the chassis this week, then we're not going to have a car in time. But sometimes when you take a deep breath and you do things in more of a linear order, and you're sure you have a complete design before you begin to jump into that manufacturing process, you really do end up saving time in the long run. Just showing the array assembly and all that here, and also the detail work in the CAD. You know, it's not just a solar array on a flat panel, but it's showing the geometry, the hinges, all of this. And when we go outside, you'll see all of it is effectively what you see here. The other thing, and this is where it can begin to get a little tricky and something that maybe begins to approach or go beyond the scope of what's capable for high school students, but the analyzing parts, and that's something, you know, you can find plenty of resources for online, you know, teachers and mentors and alumni, and I'm sure there are quite a few, you know, mechanical engineers affiliated with the school or parents who are mechanical engineers who are able to help with that. But that is also a huge time saving. You know, if you go out and you design something and it just looks beautiful, and you go and build it and then it crumples or falls apart, and I'm sure this is something everyone has done before, that takes up so much time, and it can be expensive too. You know, if we design this this really cool looking suspension, or like Triton was saying, we buy these wheels and they're super lightweight, but they have spokes, but then they fail and break. That's a huge problem. So this is sort of just showing the timeline. So the first parts to come in, and most of the design work was completed, I guess, in the fall of 2024, fall of last year. And the parts began to come in early this year. So I had the wheels in approximately January, all the aluminum in March. That was all assembled. And what I don't show here is like the assembly for these parts once I had them in hand, is it only took a couple of hours. Like honestly, to put together this suspension here on the right-hand side, or same with this suspension on the left-hand side. Like if you are diligent in your design and when you go to assemble it, that's sort of like crazy to think, wow, it only took a couple of hours to build your suspension. And it's like, oh, there's quite a few hours of design work, certainly, but now I have all the CAD and all the drawings that if I wanted to, I could make 100 of these suspensions or 1,000 of these suspensions, and it would only be an hour or two of assembly per design. And that's something you can also carry over where, if the team does a really good job on the suspension design for 1 year, be able to take that and move it into future cars, or modify the design slightly. And all of this was CNC. I cannot run a CNC mill, at least not to any degree of competency. But there are plenty of resources out there. The University of Michigan, we did a really good job of getting parts sponsored. There's a million ways online where you can get CNC parts made. The cost on paper may look expensive, but when you consider the time, effort, and tools to make CNC aluminum, or to weld control arms, steering knuckles, and that kind of thing in house, it might actually be more cost effective and easier on you to simply just design and find someone to make the parts for you. And no one should feel any shame in that. As mechanical engineers in the real world, when I design parts, I'm certainly not the person on the production line who's manufacturing that. And there's nothing, learning the hands-on skills are very important, but it's also a very important skill, and a skill that will carry you in long time in your career to be able to design and analyze parts that are easy to build, and they don't fail. So March had these parts, and this is sort of crazy. This is not bonded, the chassis on the right-hand side, but earlier in this day, earlier the day before, I dropped off the raw material for the chassis to the water jet shop. Same thing with the aero body, and approximately 48 hours later, dropped off on a Monday. On a Tuesday afternoon, picked up all of the material, and it had all been cut, and the chassis just slotted together. It had to be bonded together, so it took a couple of days, and I show all these dates and timelines, but be aware that the shop you see here or in the background is where I actually assembled the vehicle. I was about an hour from school, and so I was only there really a couple of weekends. It wasn't like I was in the shop every day and night, but it went together like extremely quickly. And that's because of all the hard work on the design side. It's a heck of a lot easier to put a hole in, say, for your suspension mounts in the computer than it is to have to go in person, maybe get out a ruler or caliper or something like that and measure where you're actually going to put those points, drill the holes, and put the mounts in. When you can do it in CAD, everything is like relative to one another, located extremely well. So sort of took a break, had to graduate, but as I got back to the assembly, I assembled these plastic body panels. You can see putting the array together on the right-hand side here, using some clever fixturing in order to support it, in order to put everything together. I think those chairs might have gotten redone, so apologies for that one. But the car just went together super quick, and I had a little bit of support, but truthfully, like I designed this, I built it, and I put it together, which just goes to show that if you're able to really capture the detailed design, and you have the manufacturing resources to support, and that's something you can certainly find in your local community, whether it's water jet shops, machine shops, laser cut, whatever the CNC capability you can find is. If you do a good job on your design, it's not a whole lot of work to actually put the vehicle together. Just sort of a high level information so folks can follow. You saw those white body panels for the chassis. Those are fiberglass laminate. It's much more affordable. This whole vehicle I already own some components, but approximately $10,000 cost, which is not a crazy amount of money. That's pretty much what most of the high school solar car teams seem to sort of bottom out at. It's hard to build a vehicle for much less than that, but I think this represents probably excellent sort of efficiency per dollar on what's possible with what you can actually put together. Everything, was designed by myself. The body panels are high density polyethylene. You'll see, I wouldn't recommend that. It's very hard to bond together high density polyethylene, which is sort of hindsight is 2020. The canopy is a water jet polycarbonate and then the combination of 3D prints, and you'll see that when we go out there. The tires, Michelin Radial X are the tires. Those are solar car specific tires. There's two specific solar car tire manufacturers. It's Bridgestone and Michelin. The Michelins are very hard to get. To acquire them new is almost impossible. The Bridgestones, I could dig up some resources if you're interested in sourcing them. But these tires are like very special and represent really like the peak of tire technology in terms of efficiency, and there are huge performance gains with them. So if you take anything away today, I would highly recommend pursuing trying to get either Bridgestone or Michelin tires. Like that is a huge performance. You think about the rolling resistance of those tires is somewhere between like 10 to 30% of what a regular road going tire is, and that's because you're not going to get 40,000 miles out of a Michelin Radial X solar car tire. When you feel it, you can feel it. The rubber is quite a bit thinner, but they are extremely efficient tires. Like I said, all the wheels, hubs, suspension, that was all custom. CNC machined aluminum, designed, analyzed, created drawing, sent out for manufacturing. I do have a chain drive on the rear, and that once again is more of a cost savings option. You can see that some things were quite expensive on this vehicle, but in general, it was built to be primarily affordable. It's a 3 kilowatt hour battery. I'm using the Maxion / SunPower cells. Those are from a company. A lot of teams have used Shine Solar in the past. They used a little bit different company called Sunfield Solar, but it's also sort of the same general concept. You're able to send them what you want. They just send it right back to you. So with solar car, really get out what you put into it. And I think a lot of people here in the room, everyone, I've said this quite a few times at different talks, but everyone's overcommitted. There's a million things between sports and maybe an after school job, instruments and all that kind of things. But with solar car, you really get out what you put in. And, for me, I put a lot into it, but I think I've also got a lot out of it, a lot of friends, all of my job, internships and my current job, I credit almost entirely due to solar car and opportunities it's given me. So this is something you have to put into to get out of it. It's not like being a part of a sports team where maybe even if you don't play, you still get to be a part of that win. With solar car, you really what you learn and what you take away is what you put into it. It's not always glorious. There's a lot of times where it's hard work. You're sanding something doesn't fit quite right. You're sweaty. It's hot. You're lifting heavy items. There's a lot of tough manual labor with solar car, and it can be hard to see the outputs of that. It's not always easy. There's lots of things, as a student that are always paying your attention, whether it's spending time with friends or whatever that might be. And sometimes it's hard to see the fruits of your labor with a project like this. But there are times where it might not be so much fun. You might think, man, this is a little challenging right now. I'd rather be hanging out at the beach with my buddies or doing something like that. But I want everyone here to remember and think like this is very possible. The Solar Car Challenge does a great job. There are tons of
vehicles so that you can drive around without having to have an additional source of power like a normal gasoline powered vehicle. In that system, you're going to have the panels themselves as well as the charge controllers, which will take that voltage and current and convert it in the necessary way to charge your batteries. So generally your panels will run at a voltage much higher than your vehicle battery and drive system. And because of this, you'll use what's called an MPPT or a solar charge controller. We'll get into those a little bit later. Take that power, step it down, and control the charge into your batteries, as well as shut off the charge when the batteries have fully filled your panels. And additionally, we're going to go over electric motors, things like that. So solar arrays, we're talking a little bit about that. So the array is actually the panels themselves. So when you look at the vehicles, the majority of them, you'll see they have this kind of T-top design where the panels are laid on top of the vehicle. This results in one of the easier designs, especially for a newer team to approach, because they don't have to do the custom arrays design. They don't have to go for solar cells. They can go buy the house panels, put them on top of the vehicle, and go racing. So if you're a brand new team, we really recommend that's where you guys start. A lot of the suppliers for these companies will sponsor you for them. So if you go up to them and ask, a lot of them will donate them to you for your team. So when you're considering how you guys are going to go about selecting your panels, big ones are in the support frame of the vehicle. How do you attach them to the vehicle in terms of making sure that they're not going to fly off on track? Anything comes off your car on track, you're going to get penalized for it. So making sure that those panels are secured to the vehicle, as well as safely attached in such a way that if in the event you have a fender bender with another vehicle, they're not going to come off. So some of the vehicles also, when you start to get into those higher speeds, anything hanging outside the vehicle is going to create aerodynamic drag. Make sure that you're paying attention to that if you're one of the advanced teams, but I think if you're at that level, you're going to already know that. Okay, so these panels are a semiconductor interface. It's a junction, and that junction has a different efficiency based on the operating temperature. So at the track, we have very high air temperatures. It can get up to 115 degrees in the air temp, which is actually going to drop your panel efficiency a not insignificant amount. So finding ways to cool your panels off, as well as not introducing any additional heat, is going to be to your guys' benefit to get the most out of your panels. So the shape of your array, the flat arrays, obviously, those are those tabletop or the T-top style. They tend to be very, very fast to manufacture because you're taking an existing array. Now, some teams have gone to the effort of manufacturing their own arrays, like this one over here, and they have integrated the cells into the body of the vehicle, which results in a much more aerodynamic design, as well as allowing them to maximize the surface area of the vehicle. So curved arrays, not as easy to manufacture. You have to figure out how you're going to stack these relatively square components onto a compound curve. So that's typically going to be some pretty custom stuff. This team here, they used pre-manufactured flexible arrays and then glued them onto the surface of the vehicle, which kind of was an in-between from doing it completely custom, but also allowing them to have some more flexibility in their design. So the pre-made commercial panels, like we went over already, are a very good option for a first-year team. What they lack is they're going to be a lot heavier. So your average commercial panel can weigh at least 20 pounds or more, which when you have a vehicle that you're trying to cut weight anywhere you can, that's going to be pretty substantial. Now, as an entry-level team, the reliability, ease of use, and approachability of those panels is going to be really important for you. So we strongly suggest that early year teams go with those pre-made panels. Additionally, you're going to be limited by the geometry of those panels. So they only typically will come in a rectangular format, and you have to figure out how to stack those in such a way that you don't exceed the maximum array dimensions for the vehicle at that time of racing. And we will check that when you come through scrutineering. So if you bring a car to us that is exceeding the maximum array, and I believe we do it by wattage now, but if you have anything that's outside of the race regulations, we will not let you race it until you rectify that. So if that means you guys lose a panel or two to meet our race regulations, that's what's going to happen. So please make sure you have that figured out before you come to the race to work out a lot better for you. Some other options, you can go to some companies that will allow you to do a custom pre-made array. So you can get different shapes and sizes, high aspect ratios as opposed to the normal rectangular panels that let you fit into your design a little more efficiently. So raw cells and lamination, this is the big one for those advanced teams. Generally speaking, if you're at this level, you're going to have to be spending a lot more time and energy and money on your project. This takes a lot of time to do. So if you're going to do this, you should have probably already started on it before you even came to this race, because the amount of time it takes to lay up the panels, do the lamination, ensure the epoxy cures correctly, test the arrays, assemble the arrays, things like that. It's a very intensive process. Additionally, these are extremely fragile cells. So when you use them, you will probably break at least a third of them. And from what we've seen with teams that have worked with those individual cells, it is a very expensive, messy, and time-consuming process. But if you're at that advanced level and you're trying to eke out those last couple of bits of performance, there you go. Okay, so do-it-yourself array, like we talked about, very steep learning curve also on that. So you have to learn how to solder the cells themselves together without overheating them and not creating a cold joint either. So you have to stay within the temperature envelope. You can't overstress them and bend them and break them, because if you break one cell in the array, that whole strip is going to stop conducting electricity, and you're going to have to either replace it or repair it. Okay, this takes a long time. Like the teams we've talked to that have approached this, they're going to spend multiple days of a week for multiple months doing this project, and they're going to be breaking those cells constantly, and they're expensive. So when you buy the individual cells, typically you're buying direct from the manufacturer. That takes a very long and complicated process. So if you just want to build a car and go racing, start the prefab. If you're trying to figure out where you can get those last couple bits of percentage of efficiency out of the system, and you're trying to really go for that last bit so you're competitive against your fellow compatriots, that's what you're going to look at. So here you can see one of the teams there soldering the cells together. The cells are wafer thin pieces of a silicon p-n junction, which is it converts the electricity as it comes, it hits the surface of the cell and then creates a voltage across it. You can take that voltage, and each of these cells will typically be in the range of 1.5 to 3 volts, I believe. And then you series those cells up, and then you'll put the multiple cells in parallel to get the expected voltage and current for your array. So a few ways you can make this a little bit easier on yourself. Instead of just using little pieces of wire, you can get these pre-made tabs that will help connect and make it a little bit easier to solder the cells together without breaking as many. These are a good option for some teams that have gone through it. All right, so I'm going to keep going just kind of section by section, but if you guys have questions about a particular section at the end, we're going to stop for a section and talk about it. So if you have any questions about the array stuff I just covered, ask them now, and then we're going to move on. All right, I know I just threw a bunch of information at you, but we're going to keep moving on. All right, so MPPTs. This stands for Maximum Power Point Tracker. Basically what this means is when you have the electricity coming from your solar array, it's going to come in at a varying voltage and current. And depending on what your battery voltage is, there is an optimum point on that voltage current curve where you pull the power out of the panel and then charge the battery up with that power. So you might pull it at a lower current and higher lower voltage, higher amperage, which is more efficient for the panels, but then charge your battery at the expected voltage. So it's a little bit more complicated than a typical charge controller, and it tends to be more efficient because instead of just charging from directly at the panel voltage, it's going to find the point along that voltage current relationship where you get the most out of your panels. And that's why they're called the maximum power point tracker, because they're going to maximize the power out of the panels to charging your batteries. Additionally, they make some other styles, but this is talking more about MPPTs. Most of the charge controllers on the market nowadays are going to be MPPT. The very inexpensive ones that you're going to find aren't going to be MPPT. We generally recommend you find the MPPT style charge controller, because the additional bit of cost is definitely worth the small increase in performance that you're going to get out of those. And every bit you can get, finding the efficiency maximums will kind of accumulate together, and you'll have a lot more efficient system overall. Additionally, the MPPTs will provide you the ability to monitor your panels. So the telemetry coming from the panels will typically be in the form of the current from the panels, the voltage, and the wattage. And by tracking that, you can maximize how you go out through your race and how you race your vehicle And how do you decide the decisions of, are we going to go faster during the morning while we're still charging? Or are we going to try to outrun the sun for a little while and then come back in the afternoon and charge? And you can make those strategic decisions with a little bit more informed basis. These are a couple of the different options that they offer. So one of the most common we see is going to be these midnight solar controllers. These are MPPT. They have been used for probably the last 20 years on vehicles, and they tend to be extremely reliable. One of the things I will say, for the majority of the parts on your vehicle, if you have the budget, please go out of your way to try and have spares. If you can get spares for the components on your vehicle, especially these show-stopping and critical components, when you have issues, and issues will come up, you can deal with the issue as opposed to waiting 6 months for the charge controller to come in from Amazon. So getting spares in general is going to be a fantastic idea if you have the budget for it. Granted, some teams don't have it. Do what you can with that information. Okay, additionally, we have Nomura, MPPTs. It kind of just depends on how you're trying to size your system and what division you're going to be in. So sizing the appropriate panel voltage to your pack voltage. Generally speaking, your panels are always going to exceed the voltage of your battery pack because it's always going to be more efficient to step the electricity down than it is to step the electricity up in voltage to charge your battery pack. Because in order for that charging to occur, you have to have a higher source voltage than a battery pack voltage. Okay, do not buy the PWM DC to DC converters that are designed to take 72 volts and drop it down to 48 volts. All they are is a voltage drop. They are not designed to actually charge control your batteries. The batteries will be overcharged, and if it's a lithium battery, it'll shut down and you'll be dead on track if you try to overcharge a battery because you have a charge controller set up that's programmed to limit the charge into your batteries. So it's very important that you make sure you actually use a proper charge controller designed to regulate the charge state of your batteries as opposed to a DC converter, which will just reduce the voltage to the appropriate level. Any more questions about MPPTs?
You said Amazon. Have you guys seen any counterfeit parts there? Because I've seen that in my business.
Yes. So I don't know specifically about charge controllers, but I know almost everything on Amazon nowadays, you have to be very careful where you're sourcing in terms of making sure that you're getting genuine components. These systems have a lot of power running through them. If they fail, they can fail pretty catastrophically and typically at the worst opportune time. So making sure that if you are buying components, making sure that they're genuine, and also by buying genuine components through direct to the manufacturer, a lot of times they'll give you for them at free or very discounted rates that you wouldn't have been able to get through Amazon as a secondary retailer. Anything else? All right, so yeah, that's one thing that applies to everything, not just charge controllers. Finding genuine components is going to be really important because when these components fail, especially the high power components that we're going to be talking about today, they fail pretty catastrophically, so be careful when you're ordering those. All right, we're going to talk about batteries. So one of the things that has changed with the Solar Car Challenge since I raced is the introduction of the lithium iron phosphate batteries. So this battery chemistry is very different from your typical lithium chemistry that was often available in the previous years. You always think of lithium, you think of dangerous, they catch fire, they explode. Don't put a lithium battery near your head when you're sleeping at night type thing. That's kind of what this chemistry has gone to avoid. So it's an in-between from the lead acid batteries to those really high capacity lithium chemistries. It's a lot safer. They tend to weigh a little bit more than the lithium ion chemistries, but the lithium iron is going to be a lot more efficient than the typical lead acid batteries. Additionally, they're going to be lighter. So for the given weight of the battery, you're going to save quite a bit in terms of your overall vehicle weight. When you're deciding your battery choice, it's kind of a step decision matrix. So what voltage do we want to run for our motor controller? And we need to match our batteries to that. And then we need to match our charge controller to the battery. And then we need to match our panels to the charge controller. So kind of working and making sure that all of your system requirements are matching across different instances where they're interacting so that you don't have 72 volts of panel into a 36 volt charger, into a 48 volt battery, into a 108 volt motor. Does that make sense? All right. So one of the things that you're going to see if you start looking into the higher voltage componentry is that there are going to be pretty substantial efficiency gains when you go to that higher voltage. So one of the tidbits of electrical engineering that you're going to get out of this today is called Ohm's law. Basically, for a given current, voltage, and resistance, you're going to have a relationship between the three. So for a given resistance of wire, say I have 3 foot of wire that has a 1/2 ohm of resistance, if I can run at a higher pack voltage, for the same given power, I can run less amperage, and I will lose less electricity across that wire, which improves my overall efficiency. Which means I can either run a smaller wire and save weight, or I can run the same gauge wire and save electricity. So there's lots of engineering decisions you can find to refine your process and how you make these decisions. Additionally, what is your goal with the vehicle can kind of have a top-down decision matrix. Is your guys' goal to go out there, maximize every available option there, and compete at the highest level? Or is your guys' goal to go to the race, participate, get those laps, get those miles, and understand what that you are experiencing through that, and then next year come back with that much more competitive car that you're pushing the limits on everything to try and be more competitive. Having a top-down decision matrix like that can kind of guide you a lot better through that. Okay, batteries. So the way we regulate the battery capacities is based on division. So depending on the division you're in, you'll have particular restrictions in terms of your maximum battery capacity. We do this in kilowatt hours, which is thousands of watt hours, which is going to be based on the discharge rate of your battery and the capacity of the battery in amp hours and the nominal voltage of the battery pack. So here we have a few example calculations of how you can determine what the watt hours for your battery is based on the spec sheet. So when you come to the station at electrical, we're going to verify that everything that you have told us in the race is correct. So we're going to make sure that the battery model matches your documentation. We're going to make sure that your documentation shows that your battery is race compliant, and we're going to make sure that you guys can actually explain that to us. So one of the things that happens with a mechanical and electrical station is we're going to be asking questions about the car. So the person that comes up to the station with the vehicle needs to be able to explain and understand what vehicle they have there, so that when I ask what component is this in the vehicle, they can say, okay, that's the charge controller. Okay, what does the charge controller do? They should be able to explain. Charge controller takes the power from the panels, regulates it correctly to charge the battery, and allows us to drive the vehicle. So this is a factor that is more particular to lead acid batteries. I don't think any teams this coming year will be running lead acid, more than likely because they're effectively old technology by this point, but this is still something that applies to the lithium chemistries, just not to the same degree because the cells tend to be a lot more efficient. When you have a battery with a given capacity and a given resistance, the more current you pull out of the battery, because of the resistance of the battery, you will get less overall power out of it because the battery will eat up some of that electricity due to its internal resistance. So what you can see here is that as we discharge at different rates, and this is the discharge rate here, we're going to have different resulting capacities based on how quickly we pull the power out. Because if we're pulling power more quickly out of that battery, we're going to be pulling at higher amperage, which is then going to result in higher power losses due to resistance on the internal resistance of the battery. Now, the lithium iron chemistries have much lower internal resistance, so you don't see as strong of a curve reaction here, but it still does occur. Like I said, lithium irons are not allowed. So one of the big things with the lithium irons is you can buy them with 2 different configurations. You can buy them as individual cells, or you can buy them in this monolithic block that has the cells and the BMS all built inside. If you want to do your own pack like this, you need to ensure that you have also bought the accompanying battery management system that is going to monitor each cell voltage and ensure that the packs don't drift out of regulation. The lead acid batteries compared to the lithium chemistries are more self-regulating, so you can put multiple lead acid batteries in series without having a deviation in the voltages. The lithium batteries, if you put, say, 4 lithium batteries in series and ran them, if you tried to charge and discharge and charge and discharge, those battery voltages, instead of all being nominal 3.7, will start to deviate between them, and you'll start to overcharge one battery, undercharge another, and that's when you start to see issues with battery fires and things like that. So if you're going to run a lithium iron chemistry, or any lithium chemistry for that matter, you need to have cell level BMS monitoring, be it built into the battery like this one, built into the battery like this one, or a system that allows you to add it on yourself. And you need to have the documentation that proves that to us. So we need to be able to see that the battery has it built in. And if you have a battery data sheet that says it has it built in, cool, that's fine. If you have a external BMS that you have installed yourself and programmed and things like that, we need to see the documentation for that also. So, okay. All right, this is one of the big ones. So there are different ways you can approach how you want to test your batteries for the vehicle. When you are buying batteries from the manufacturers, they will typically provide you with a spreadsheet of the specs for the performance. Take it with a grain of salt and actually do your own testing, especially if you're buying from some of the less reputable vendors. They tend to fudge the numbers a little bit and make sure that what you're getting is actually what you're expecting. So doing that testing where you can actually see the voltage current curve versus capacity will let you know exactly what you have and make more informed decisions. These are a few of the batteries that are for lead acid, and then there's a few. There has been a general push towards the lithium iron chemistries. We don't have any specific recommendations for that, but if you start asking some of the other teams, looking around and seeing what's common, a lot of teams are running a direct replacement golf cart battery at the 48 volt range to 96 volts is typically what we see. Any questions about batteries? All right, cool. So now we're going to touch on the power system in this side. So how do you get the electricity out of your batteries to the ground to get your car moving? So when you're looking at the electric motors, you're going to see a couple different configurations that are very common. And this is also restricted by your racing class. Some divisions are allowed to run those hub motors. Some divisions are not. Now, as far as brushed versus brushless, there's no restrictions there in terms of what racing class you're allowed to utilize those. But regardless, there are a few decisions you can make, especially if you're running on a tighter budget. There are brushed motor offerings that are going to be less expensive than the comparable brushless electric motors. Now, when you go and pay that little bit extra for the brushless, you're going to get higher efficiency, but you're also going to have a little bit more complexity to that. The brushless motor controllers, because of the way they operate, tend to have a little bit more going on inside them because they're not just varying the output voltage, but they're also regulating the phases of the individual windings. So this is going to be probably a budgetary choice in terms of how your team wants to approach this question. There are good offerings for both, but if you have the money, it's likely best spent on going to the brushless. So this is a pretty common option. I think our team actually ran this one, but this is a brushed motor. It still had a very high 90% efficiency rating, but when you start looking at those brushless motors, you can get into the 96% rating or higher, which if you're one of those advanced teams that's racing neck and neck with your competitors, that extra 6% might be the difference between 50 laps at the end of the day and 53. A little bit of motor data. So every motor you buy is going to come with a spec sheet, assuming it's a reputable vendor, where it will tell you what the operating curve is for this. And this is a lot of different figures for it. We're looking at the operating voltage for it, which is going to be based on your battery pack voltage, and then also the expected RPM versus torque. So if you have a vehicle that you've designed to operate at 40 miles an hour, make sure that you're gearing your motor to have enough power, but also to be in that peak efficiency range where you expect to spend most of your time driving. Don't gear your vehicle, go a little more into this, but don't gear your vehicle too high such that your vehicle is never able to hit that peak efficiency and it's always running under or over the expected RPM range. Now, compared to a typical gasoline motor, an electric motor is going to be a lot more efficient across its RPM range, but there is still a curve there. Here's another brush motor option. The comparable brushless motors are going to be 10 to 20% more expensive. The controllers are going to be 30 to 40% more expensive. Okay, brushless. All right, so very efficient. We're going to be starting to get over 90% here. The brushless motors don't have the carbon brushes rubbing on the motor shaft, which is causing the parasitic drag on that motor. Additionally, the way they're regulated, they can drive the motor with the controller in a way that is going to be a lot more efficient than the expected brushed motor. Okay, hub motors. So advanced teams are specifically going to be looking at these. The hub motors are a direct drive motor, which means that the motor is Attached to the wheel of the vehicle, there is no gears, there is no chain, there is no belt. Because of this, you have a much more simple drive system, but you have some other design characteristics you have to consider. A brushless hub motor like this one is going to be direct drive, which means you can't gear it to a particular range. You need to design your system to match the expected RPM of the motor for that peak efficiency, if that's what you're going for. These are very expensive, but they have, in the last couple of years, offered a few from the overseas manufacturers. I believe Golden Motor might be one. They might have a hub motor offering. But the traditional expensive Mitsuba/Naruma hub motors are still going to be over $25,000, which is going to be easily 10x what you're going to spend on a comparable hub, a non-hub brushed or brushless motor. QS, okay, that's the brand. So if you're looking for an inexpensive brushless hub motor, that's where you want to go. These are a couple different controllers. The difference between the controllers physically is very small. In terms of the way you wire them up, there's only one additional wire for the additional phase on the brushless motors, but the internal programming tends to be a little bit more complex for those brushless motors because they have a lot more control available to you. You can change the parameters of how they operate. Motor controller questions / motors. Okay, either I'm giving you guys everything you ever needed or, sir. Correct. Yes. So Triton touched on this earlier. Spoked wheels in solar cars tend to fall apart and break. In general, if you're going to run a spoked wheel, the spokes will come undone at some point and the wheel will collapse and then we're going to have to go haul you off the track.
At least once a year, there's always a car that breaks down. So.
Correct. What's up? Depends very much on the manufacturer and the source. So if you go to a secondary retailer, it could be less than a week. If you're going direct to manufacturer, it could be months. If you're going something overseas, it could be multiple months. So it's really just going to depend on the situation and the relationship you have with your retailer. Yes.
Why do the boxes are generally track versus road? Is there any detail on that?
Yes, I'll get you in just a second. So track versus road, the conditions are very different. So you think about a track race, it's going to be consistently going around the same circle all day, every day. The only thing you really have to worry about is the change in the weather conditions. A road race, you're going to be going up hills, down hills, winding slopes, things like that. So the decisions you make in terms of the operating range expectancy of your motor is going to be very different. So if you are driving down the track, you're going to try to target a particular speed all the time, and you won't have to change much besides passing vehicles. When you're on a road race, you'll have to go through stoplights. This means you're going to be starting, stopping, accelerating, things like that. So you need to be able to operate within a wider range or envelope of that motor's capability and not be outside the expected parameters. So you're not going to overheat the motor. You're not going to draw too much torque current out of it and have the motor system fail. Yes, sir.
I was just going to ask, controllers, any programming involved? So how much?
Very much retailer dependent. A lot of them nowadays come pre-programmed, and a lot of times they're very difficult to access the programming on. So Subcon in particular has a very restricted interface that you have to pay a lot of money for to get access to, or go find some sketchy Russian code. So in general, if you buy it from a regular retailer that's come pre-programmed, you shouldn't have any issues. You shouldn't have to mess with it. They may ask you a few questions about what you would like programmed, what your expected kind of limitations are in terms of voltage and current, what you want to restrict it to. But otherwise, it shouldn't be a huge issue. The Alltrax controllers are very simple and the interfaces are pretty cheap. Any more questions? Cool. All right, so gearing, I already kind of hit this one, but when you are designing, and like she said, for the expected envelope of how you're going to operate your vehicle. So if I'm deciding I'm going to drive my car 20 miles an hour average, and for the cross-country race, we actually have a minimum speed limit that we strictly enforce. So you need to be able to hit that minimum consistently or do better. So designing your vehicle to be able to operate within a varying range so that you can match the terrain that you're going up, especially if you have to climb a grade or descend one, and you're able to manage that effectively, is going to be really important for the cross-country race coming up. The track race, the conditions are going to be a lot more consistent, so you don't have to necessarily design for as much margin in terms of how much more additional torque do we need to go up a 6% grade versus how much torque do we need to go on flat ground, things like that. So most teams are going to be running a chain drive. Chains are fantastic from an efficiency standpoint, but you do have to ensure that when you are assembling the motor and relative to the rear sprocket of the vehicle, that they are aligned both axially and rotationally so that they are not going to be binding or clicking or throwing the chain. A lot of teams will see come to the race where they'll have it such that the motor will be mounted to the chassis of the vehicle, but the rear spring or the rear wheel will be mounted on a swing arm. And then as the suspension cycles, the chain comes loose when it compresses and goes tight when it descends. So they'll start skipping teeth and things like that. So generally, if you're going to do that fixed chain, you want to have the motor on the swing arms such that it's going to oscillate with it, as opposed to creating slack in that chain, which is going to cause it to jump teeth and you might end up breaking something there. Chains need lubricated. So if you're going to run a chain drive, make sure you buy some actual chain lubricant. Spray it every couple hundred miles, because that chain is going to wear out prematurely from the dust, the dirt, and the grime that gets on it if you do not lubricate that chain. They will start getting very loud also. And I don't think I have anything specific about this one here, but belt drives are an option. They tend to be less efficient. So if for whatever reason your manufacturer only offers a belt drive option for how you attach the sprocket to the shaft, don't necessarily stray away from it, but know that most teams are going to go with the chain drive, and it tends to be a little more forgiving. Now, when you're deciding how to gear your motor, you need to decide what your expected speed is that you're going to be able to maintain, how much torque that's going to require, so then you can design, go to your motor chart and find that point on the curve. And then you're going to take those numbers, you're going to plug them into an equation like this that will basically say, for a given speed of the motor, what do I need a given wheel speed? And then you can calculate your gearing relative to each other. So you might say, I need a 10-to-1 gear ratio. So for a 10-tooth sprocket, I'll have on the drive side, I'll have a 100-tooth sprocket on the driven side. Okay, so options for sourcing these. You can go online to MasterCar. You can also go in person to Tractor Supply. Typically somewhere in the back, they'll have a whole host of these types of standardized gearing. And it depends on what standard you go with, but if you stick with one standard, you can find multiple sizes within that range. So if we had, say, a number 60 roller chain, you can buy that number 60 roller chain in a 10-foot length, cut it to the length you need, combine it, or put the master link, put the chain together, and then buy number 60 sprockets with a 10-tooth and then a 100-tooth, and then you can put the 100-tooth on your driven wheel and the 10-tooth on your drive wheel. So there's also some companies that will offer custom sprocket sizes. I would say that for new teams, the sprocket ratio is one of those things that you're going to have to play with a little bit. You can make some calculations, but until you've really done it, there's some variance there, and cars probably going to end up heavier than you expected. You need more gearing than you realize you actually do. So gear conservatively, especially if you're going to be a new team. Any questions about gearing? I know I kind of hit that off. Yes, sir.
You talked about speed road course for the
Correct. Brandon, is that correct? 20 miles? Yep. And that's a combination of a safety and performance thing. If we're a rolling roadblock going 5 miles an hour, there's going to be accidents.
Especially that first day when everyone's all up together on a cross country race with everyone. It's on with probably like 25 teams, let's say, 4 vehicles all going 5 miles an hour. That's going to cause a lot of blockages.
And yeah, typically or at least there'll be parts of the race that we're going to be on single lane on opposing traffic highways, and the people that are behind us. Just 1 second. The people that are behind us will have to pass us, and they need to be able to pass us efficiently, and we do not need to be going so slow that we're creating a roadblock. Yes. No, there is no maximum speed besides speed limits for the cross-country race. And of course, drive to your ability and the vehicle's ability. Any other questions? All right, so we're going to move on to the overview of the electrical system. So when you're All right, when you're doing the electrical system design, you're going to typically split it into two systems, and you're going to take a system level approach. So the propulsion system is going to be your panels, charge controller, battery, motor controller, things like that. So that's going to be high power, high voltage. Your auxiliary system is going to be everything else that is telemetry, lights, horn, driver fans, things like that. That's going to be a low voltage, typically inside the driver's compartment. One of the restrictions for the race is no high voltage within the driver's compartment. So anything over 36 volts is considered high voltage for us. You're not allowed to have that inside the driver's compartment. Additionally, they need to be isolated. So when you have these two systems, the only time that we allow you to have any crosstalk between them is going to be telemetry systems. And we have a particular rule in the rule book that says you can't have any more than 1 mega ohm of continuity between the systems. Additionally, they need to be isolated from the vehicle frames. So you can't ground your lights from your auxiliary or your motor from your propulsion system to the frame. Everything needs to be isolated from the frame. For schematics, this is going to go towards your guys' documentation. You should submit a set of schematics for both your propulsion and your auxiliary and show that where there is a crosstalk between those two. So ensuring that you have accurate electrical schematics when you come to the race, and if they've changed, update them and bring them to us, as well as showing us what the major components are, how you've connected them, and then how your systems, if they are using telemetry to talk to the auxiliary from the propulsion, are actually isolated otherwise.
The one on the left.
Yes, so this one right here, we don't like hand-drawn things. If you can tell, the readability of the right one versus the left one is substantially different. Now, you guys have time, go find a proper electrical software, learn how to use it, learn how to read the different componentry, and sketch out your diagram, because this will do two things for you. One, it'll document the vehicle, but it'll also provide you with a troubleshooting map / assembly guide for how do you assemble the vehicle once you have your chassis that you want to put your electrical components on. A lot of teams will lay out the electrical system on a wooden board to simulate all the functions of it. Now, when you do this, make sure your motor is actually strapped down, because it'll jump off the table if you turn it on full power. Don't ask me how I know. But when you do that, make sure it's strapped down, because these motors, they'll spin up just fine. The second you let off that throttle, the regenerative braking will stop and the motor will spin off the table. So make sure it's strapped down when you do that. Be careful. But simulating that electrical system while your team is working on building the chassis, as opposed to having to test everything on vehicle, is going to let you guys isolate a lot of those issues early on, assemble that electrical harness off the vehicle, and then place it on the vehicle when it's ready. Please bring both schematics for both systems. Yes? I don't. Okay. Okay. So like Dr. Marks touched on, Siemens offers a few. There's a variety of companies. I believe Autodesk and SolidWorks also have their own electrical softwares. Generally, anything that's like a piece-spice design, and if you go and look it up, it's a way you can simulate electronics, but something that's just able to use the general componentry to allow you to sketch it out. You don't have to be able to simulate it, but at least be able to sketch it out and understand the flow and follow each component through its component diagram so you understand what's going on. It's going to be really important. And make sure you bring both schematics, because a lot of times people will only bring one schematic or the other, and we need to see both with all the components. And one of the things that I will do is, while I am looking at schematics, I might ask you guys questions about schematics. So if I would say point to the panels, and I'd ask you where are the panels on the vehicle and where are they on the schematic, you should be able to explain to me, especially if you're the electrical lead, where they are on the vehicle and where they are on the schematic and what the purpose is. It's not going to be a test, but there will be some questions to make sure that you guys understand. And if you don't, that's okay, but you need to go figure it out, and preferably come to the race having that understanding, so that when you have issues on the vehicle, you can address them. Okay, so this is one of the big ones that happened a couple years back, and some teams still don't seem to have this one figured out. The contactors. So a long time ago, you used to use these big red push buttons to turn the vehicle off and on. They were operating at the high voltage of the pack. We don't allow those anymore. You have to use contactors, which are a large solenoid relay that allows you to control the high voltage system using the low voltage system, but it's isolated. So there is no electrical connection between the high voltage terminals of this component and the low voltage terminals, which means that when I activate the button in my cockpit of the vehicle to turn on the main motor disconnect, There will be no way that the electricity from the main battery pack can get into the cockpit of the vehicle and electrocute the driver. So it's really important that there's nothing of high voltage within the driver's compartment, including wires. So if you have your panel array above the driver and the wires are hanging down in his face, that's inside the driver's compartment. You need to isolate the driver from that somehow. Additionally, when you are fusing, make sure that you are buying appropriately voltage rated fuses. You can find them from a variety of retailers, but ensure that if you're running a 72 volt system, your fuse is rated for 72 volts, because when that fuse fails, the gap created may not be enough to break the current conduction if it's not rated appropriately. So ensure that you're running the right voltage fuses, because at the very high voltages, the fuses can actually be arced across if you're not careful. Low voltage systems. This is one that always tends to cause issues for a few teams. Make sure that you have a low voltage alarm that indicates loudly and clearly if you have a low voltage for your auxiliary battery. You need to be able to tell if your low voltage battery is about to die, because once your low voltage battery dies, your car dies on track, because the low voltage battery is powering your contactors. So there's no way you can run your vehicle with a dead low voltage battery, which means you're going to have to pull it off track. So please make sure that if you have a please make sure that the low voltage alarm that you will have works loudly enough that you can actually hear it. A lot of these cars are extremely loud when you're on track, especially with the chains, and you need to be able to make sure that you're actually paying attention and replacing that low voltage battery before you die on track, creating an obstruction. And there are several options. You can buy the meters with them built in. You can buy these kits that allow you to set the thresholds. You can assemble yourself something out of an Arduino and a few little components if you want to do that. It just needs to be able to be some sort of loud indicator that aggressively warns the driver that the vehicle is about to run out of electricity for the low voltage system. Wire selection. This one's a big one. Do not use solid core wire on any of your vehicle anywhere. That is for houses. We do not use house wiring on solar cars. Additionally, when you're selecting your propulsion system wire, ensure that, and this goes for all the wires, but specifically propulsion, make sure it's rated for the appropriate current and voltage that you're going to be running through it. These cars can pull upwards of 3 kilowatts or more while they're driving down the road. That means a lot of power going through a very small conductor. If you haven't sized it correctly, that conductor will melt and set your car on fire. So make sure that you are sizing your wire appropriately. The wire will come in a variety of gauges. Determine your maximum operating point, continuous current, and then size your wires for that. Same for the fuses. When you size them, they don't have to necessarily be for your, you can limit the motor to be at a certain peak, but you just have to size the fuse appropriately to that peak. So maybe your motor is rated for 500 amps, but you've told the controller to restrict it to 200 because your battery is only rated for 200. You can size your wire off that 200 amp rating. Additionally, size your fuse off that. The more strands you have in the wire, the better. It's going to be more flexible. It's going to be less prone to fatiguing as well as breaking. Welding cable tends to be one of the more reliable conductors. Do not buy audio wiring for stereos. It tends to be aluminum core wire that tends to fail much more quickly. Additionally, and as we saw here, there's a few offerings that are going to be counterfeit. So when you're buying the wire, especially off Amazon, make sure that the wire you got is actually 4 gauge inside and not just looks like 4 gauge because the outside's a lot larger in diameter. There's quite a bit of counterfeit there because copper is expensive. So good wire will be expensive. If you found wire that's too cheap for what it should be, it's probably too cheap for a reason. Heat shrink, soldering, and splicing. So when you are splicing wires together, it's kind of a general rule that the best way to do this is going to be a crimp, or a crimp with heat shrink, or a crimp with solder and heat shrink, or a solder joint with heat shrink. If you notice, there's always heat shrink in there. There's no electrical tape in that sentence. So please do not use electrical tape on your vehicles and the propulsion systems at all. I don't want to see any electrical tape on the propulsion systems. I only want to see heat shrink or vulcanized rubber boots that you've bought that slide over the terminal, or vulcanized rubber that you have securely mechanically fastened. We don't like to see tapes because tapes get hot, the adhesive melts, and the adhesive fails, and you've lost your insulation. Now you come over, you drop your 10 mil, 1 second. You drop your 10 mil wrench on there, and it's going to arc across the terminal, so the vehicle's going to burn to the ground. What's up? Liquid electrical tape. Fantastic question. No liquid electrical tape. So liquid electrical tape does insulate. There is a rules change. No liquid electrical tape. I'm pretty sure it's in the rules now. Okay. Okay, so do not use it because it's always used wrong. And even though theoretically you could insulate something with it, nobody ever does it right. It's not abrasion resistant and it's not safe. So don't bring it. We don't have to worry about it. All right, you guys got quite a few months now to figure out how to insulate something besides that. What's up?
And spray.
Spray foam. Yeah, spray foam is not really designed to insulate things. It's designed to insulate houses, not electrical systems. Okay. So get through that stuff. Soldering, it's always a good option when you can to solder wires. Crimps versus solder, depends on who you ask. One might be more reliable than the other. If you do either properly, you'll never have an issue. Questions, quickly. Good? All right, cool. Hey, oh, one. Just
It's all contactors.
Correct. Like the big red. Yeah. No physical disconnects because we want the car to shut off when the low voltage system fails, so that the drivers are out on track driving without lights or driver fans. So,
There are still physical disconnects that disconnect the way you control. But there's no disconnect between the
yeah. So you can have the switch that activates it be latching, and we do want a latching switch that will turn off, but it can't be driving directly to power. So, I think they got rid of that. Or it was a gray area last year.
I don't remember the compliment.
What was the question?
Using the physical electrical disconnects on the charging arrays that are not on vehicle.
Wouldn't you want
I agree. So they are much safer, and we generally like to see the usage of those.
You got a store coming. You want to get the turn things off quickly.
So, is that a discretionary thing, or are we going to make a rule now?
We do require them to have forced ventilation on battery bars, so they all charging. So it would be good to have. That way we can make sure that they're not charging without the ventilation on.
All right. So if you guys have more questions about that particular rule, come find us after this event's over. We'll have a better answer for you about that one. But otherwise, any more questions? Or we'll move this on. Brandon. All righty. Sir. Correct. What about it? Oh, just explain it? Okay, so. Yes, so the lithium batteries are a sealed chemistry. They do not vent gases unless there is a substantial failure within the battery. The lead acid batteries vent hydrogen gas and sulfuric acid. So you want to make sure that there is a path for this hydrogen gas and sulfuric acid to get out of the vehicle when you're running a lead acid chemistry. If you're running a lithium chemistry, the battery needs to be sealed. Or you can ventilate it, but if you're going to not ventilate it, it needs to be sealed.
Please, thank you very much.
So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through what you're going to expect on an average cross-country race. So for those of you that don't know yet, this upcoming race, we're going to be doing a road race driving around the state of Texas. So we're going to still start here at Texas Motor Speedway, right across the freeway. We'll have our normal 3 days of scrutineering, which I'll go into a little bit here in a second. And then we're expecting 5 days of racing. I don't know if you finalized that. Have you? Okay. We're expecting 5 days of racing, and we'll race a big loop around Texas and ultimately end up back here in Fort Worth. So for scrutineering, we'll have 7 stations in total. So we have our mechanical and electrical station, which both me and Triton have just talked through. Other stations we've not gone over are station 3, tilt and turn. So that's when we're going to take your car, we're going to physically tilt it and run it through a turn to make sure it has enough turn radius. We'll also, during that station, take your weight on your vehicle this year. Station 4, slalom, this is our handling station. You will set up a series of cones, and your car will have to drive a slalom course through those cones. And that's just to prove that every driver is capable of handling your car, and your car has stability in the event you have to make a abrupt turn during the race. Yes, without hitting the cones. Station 5, our braking station. I believe this was touched on a little in mechanical. It's a pretty simple station. We'll have you bring your car up to 20, 25 miles an hour. And you have a certain time / distance that you have to be able to stop your car within. Our endurance is a simulated lap that you'll do around the track. So it's just kind of simulating a longer distance drive. So you'll do one full lap around the track, and then you'll also do a full simulated breakdown. So you'll simulate having any mechanical issue with your car. You'll bring your support vehicle out, practice loading and unloading onto your trailer. So that's just proving to us that you know how to load your car safely, and especially on a road race when you're going to be on the side of the highway with other pedestrian cars going past you. We want to make sure you know how to do that safely. And then special for our road races, we have a specific road race station. This is a station where we will take a box truck. We'll take you out onto the main road of the speedway and have you pass each other along the road doing, I think it's like 45 is what the truck does, somewhere around there. So that's basically simulating the forces that we expect you will see as we're on some of those back roads, and we'll have 18-wheelers going past. And as someone who's driven on the road, let me say how terrifying it is having an 18-wheeler pass you. Yeah. And then if you are racing in either our electric solar division or our cruiser division, we have an extra station that's special for those divisions only that will go over those division specific rules. And then another thing that a lot of new teams forget about is we also do have a final sign-off station. So even once you get through all our stations, you'll go through one final sign-off, and that's where they'll just look over the entire car as a whole, make sure nothing slipped through the cracks, and that we have a fully functioning good car. I already went all the way through that. Yep.
As fast as safely as possible. So typically what they'll do is they'll do 2 runs. They'll do one, every driver has to go through it, but one of the drivers has to go faster than the rest. But typically it's not full speed, it's 15, maybe 20 miles an hour. But
yeah, I don't know if we actually measure the speed on that station. It's more discretionary of those judges that are doing it, that at least one of your drivers has to go probably about that speed.
And we're not only checking to see if the driver can handle the slalom, we want to see if your car is stable. You don't want it to flip over just because you did a quick turn.
I mean, it's fast, but it's not as fast as you think. For cross-country races, we do hold cars to a higher standard than we do on track races. Being a track race, we have more control over our environment, so we're able to be a little bit more lenient on some of our rules. For us cross-country race, especially the safety rules, either you meet it or you don't. And another tip that's been touched on here is when you go through scrutineering, don't focus on a singular station at a time. Which I actually stole Triton slides from earlier because I liked this. So I guess I'll actually just use this slide. Make sure you read the rules. You have the rule books. Read through them now. Read through them next week. Constantly read through those. Our team, whenever we race, we have multiple binders just scattered throughout our workspace of all of our rules. And that way, they're always quick and easy to reference. Same thing with the scrutineering booklet. Read through that. Make sure you know what it is. The amount of questions we get during scrutineering of people asking what we're checking at what station is a lot. And a lot of those answers, if you just read through those rule books and that scrutineering booklet, you'll be able to answer those questions already. And again, for scrutineering, don't focus on a singular station at a time. A lot of our teams that struggle to get through scrutineering are particularly our newer teams that focus on one station. They'll go to mechanical, they'll get a list of 5 or 6 things that are wrong, they'll go try to fix them, they'll go back to mechanical, then they'll go back to mechanical. Don't do that. Go to mechanical, get your list of a few things. Go to electrical, get your list. Go to station 3, go through all those. Yes. Yeah, get your list of what you need to fix through all those stations. Start working on that list while you're waiting to do other stations, and then go back to those stations. You'll get through shooting so much faster.
I was gonna say, like, our first year doing winter shooting, we did tilt and turn. That'd be a really, really decent station. It's all you're doing is tilting and turn. We spent literally a day and a half on tilt and turn, making our car turn the whole, I think, 5 meters, or when it's 15 feet, I think, 15 feet, or whatever it is, turn radius. And we spent so much time wasted on that. That's what goes to where we almost make sure here our first year. So do all the stations as much as possible. But mainly 1 and 2 of the things.
Yeah, the other thing that is important on this slide is bring all your tools and spare parts, especially on a road race. We're not always near civilization. It may be a distance to get to the nearest Walmart or a Home Depot or anything like that if you want to buy spares. If you have budget and you have spares, bring them with you. One of my favorite stories from when I raced in 2018 is we had a bunch of spare batteries, but made the conscious decision to not bring them on the road race with us. In the middle of Arizona, one of our batteries burned up, and we were not able to use the rest of that battery pack for the duration of that day. Fortunately, we had a parent that was willing to back home, go to our school, get those batteries, go to the airport, and manage to convince TSA to allow him to bring 2 SLA batteries onto an aircraft. Don't be in that situation. Bring them. If you have spares, bring them. So I'm going to go over just kind of a sample of what to expect during the actual road race part of the road race. I'm going to use our road race from 2023, so that's when we raced from Fort Worth out to Palmdale, California, just kind of run through it. So this was the route that we had during that race. Again, started here in Fort Worth and all the way to Palmdale. It's about 1,300 miles. So this year we're expecting a similar distance, just we're going to be going through a big loop in Texas instead of going across the country. So again, team logistics, kind of just touch on that, the spare thing. We're moving every single day. You're staying in a different city. So you will have different hotel locations every night. You have to figure out how to bring all of your stuff with you. Bring all of your luggage, all of your spare parts, any tools, things like that. During the race, teams are responsible for the majority of meals throughout the race. We'll usually provide 1 a day sometimes, just kind of depends on the race route. Particularly the lunch, you're almost always on your own for that. And you'll also be providing lunch for your judge that you have during. And then another thing, you're on the road, it's a long day, rushing are few and far between. Highly recommend anytime you get the chance to go, regardless of whether or not. So our race convoy, during our cross-country races, we'll be driving in a convoy. So that convoy consists of 4 cars in total. So that is your lead car, your solar car, your chase vehicle, and then trailer. Depending on the team, your trailer is typically going to be a part of your chase vehicle 1 or chase vehicle 2. Some teams use that as their lead vehicle. It just kind of depends on your team strategy there. Important note here is if you have any extra vehicles, sometimes teams, especially our larger teams, will have more vehicles than just that. Any additional vehicles you have will have to stay greater than a mile apart from your main convoy. That's again just to help us spread out. We'll have 20 teams, each 4 cars long. That's math I can't do in my head. 80 cars trying to travel down the road at a very slow speed. Important thing with our race convoy, traffic laws obviously still apply, as well as all of our rules and regulations. So we have a series of rules, particularly about cross-country races and how we handle passing and things like that. And again, we just touched on this. Our minimum speed limit is 20 miles an hour. So if your car is not able to sustain 20 miles an hour on a road race, we'll have you pull over, load it, and either find somewhere safe to charge or just trailer it. That's really up to your team to decide there. More specific procedures will be released as we get closer to the race. And again, for our EV teams, your charging station has to be mounted onto a trailer of some sort in order to be able to transport that with you, as that is not a part of your solar vehicle itself. Okay, so this, again, going back to our 2023 race, here's a sample race route of our first day. So you can see we started here up in Fort Worth. We drove this first segment. And then this red area was a mandatory trailering. Depending on the route, we'll have sections that are mandatory trailering. So these are areas that, regardless of your battery power, you're required to pick your car up and trailer it for that distance. This is usually just because either it's just too mountainous for the solar cars, or the traffic along that road is just too much traffic for us to confidently have solar cars on it. And then we also have multiple there's multiple rest stops throughout the day. So these are points where we'll either have media stops, which I believe, yes. So we'll have like a designated spot for you to stop for lunch, designated spots for you to stop for media at certain cities or take breaks. So here's kind of an example schedule for what a race day will look like. Impound usually opens really early in the morning. So around 6:30 a.m. is usually when you first get access to your car. We'll have an all teams meeting at 8 a.m. most mornings, and the race starts at 9. Between the all teams meeting and race start, we will line you up in start order for that day. And then come 9 a.m. for race start, we'll release teams in what we call our delta times. So the very first team will release at 9 o'clock. The second team will release at 9:01, 9:02, 9:03, and so on and so forth. And then that delta time is also used for your stop time. So for example, if your team starts at 9:05 a.m., you don't end until 5:05. So everyone still gets the same amount of driving time. That's just to kind of help us spread out the pack so we're not all leaving the race site at the same time. Again, there's usually some sort of rest stop or mandatory trailering. We'll always have a lunch stop. Some days we'll have media stops. So that's when we'll coordinate with the local cities, and they'll have some sort of media presence there to interview you, talk to you about the car. And then we end our day at 5 p.m. on most days. Regardless of where you are on the race route, at 5 p.m. you'll pick up your car and the trailer to the end of the day. Then our impound usually closes at 9 p.m. So you can work on your car up until 9. So going a little bit more specifically, again, so 6:30 again, access your car. This is where you'll first get your judge for the day. So that judge will stay with you the entire day. They will be sitting in the passenger seat of your first chase vehicle. So that just gives them the best visual access to your solar car, and they'll just follow you along all day. In the morning, you can charge your car, do maintenance, do repairs, modification. Okay, so we're going again. Here's that all teams meeting. This is where we'll go over day-specific information. We will hand out any trophies and announce results from previous days, and then we'll begin lining up the start order. Again, here's the race start, where I was talking about that 1 minute interval. We'll have you in the full convoy when we start. The starting order day 1 will be based off of a random drawing. So we just go in numerical order, team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4. And those numbers are just a draw of the hat during team check-in. All following days, you do start order based off previous day results. So whichever team has the most amount of miles day 1 will start first, day 2. Whoever has the second most will start second, so on and so forth. Again, our rest stops are typically about 15 minutes. These are just a mandatory stop. We have stop for 15 minutes. It's kind of your time. You can do what you want with it. You're able to stay longer if you want, though you're only required to stay 15 minutes. Lunch, 30 minutes usually, and again, your team's responsible for providing lunch with the judge. Whatever your team's eating is what the judge is. Media stops, similar to our rest stops, the only difference is we'll have some sort of media presence there, or there'll be locals from that town will come and ask you questions. Something I recommend having is someone on your team as a designated spokesperson for your team. So when you get to these, they'll be the primary speaking person.
Can I add something there?
Yep.
There is nothing like having a designated spokesperson, because you can be on the side of the road trying to change your tire and have 3 cars with people stopping wanting to talk to you. So that happens. You've got a designated spokesman. They're going to run interference like a front line, defensive line out there, so that the person who's changing the tire doesn't have 3 people behind them saying, "Hey, where do you put the gas in this thing? You know, what you want to throw a wrench at?" Don't want to do that. So a designated spokesman will save you a lot on a race like this.
End of day again. We typically end at 5 p.m. Regardless of where you are on that race route, you'll stop, you'll pick up your car and trailer to the end. The majority of our teams on most days won't finish the entire route, so you'll usually have some trailing.
But you want to pick it up at 5 because at 7 o'clock, most of the communities we go through will provide you with dinner. So you want to be there. If you're not there at 7, you miss it.
Yeah, and then again, with the end of the day, we use our delta starting times for the end of the day. So if your team starts at 9:05, we meet at 5:05. And then once you get to wherever the destination for that day is, impound is usually open until 9 p.m. So you're able to work on your car, do whatever you need to do up until that time. And once impound begins, you have to be hands off, aren't able to touch your gear around the car. You'll gain access to it again the next day. At the end of each day, well, so I guess for scoring on a cross-country race, we use accumulated distance of the solar vehicle trip. So that's how many miles your car actually drives throughout the day. We use GPS data in order to calculate that. And then at the end of every single day, we go through all that data, we audit it, validate how many miles you actually drove, and sure we give you credit for everything you did drive. And then you also only get credit for distance you drive on the official race route. So if your team makes a wrong turn and goes 10 miles off the road, you lost 10 miles of driving.
Hey, Brandon, can I go back to the original location where I got off track and go 10 miles that long?
No, you can only gain credit for a segment of road once. You can't drive in a loop over and over and try and get.
Well, I'm saying if I went on track.
And
I want to come back on track where I lost.
Yeah. So if your team ends up going on track, which there's usually 1 or 2 teams every year that do this, you are more than welcome to trail your car back to wherever you lost the race route, put the car back down, and continue driving. And then you'll still get credit for what you did on the route. You'll just lose out on that 20, 30 minutes or however long that detour was. Any questions? Right.
Matthew's going to talk to you about race.
That's right. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is our very last presentation. Very exciting one. We'll be talking about the race rules. So as a lot of people have mentioned earlier today, every presentation that we've given is not a replacement for reading the rule book itself. This is something that we really require everybody who's involved in the race to do, whether you're an advisor, student, heck, probably wouldn't even be bad for parents to be aware of what's in the rule book. But make sure you just devote some time to actually reading the rule book before you start the car or before you go about designing your car, building your car, and especially before you come to Texas Motor Speedway for scrutiny. So a few helpful tips, and I'm definitely rehashing a few things here, but read the rule book multiple times. Don't try reading the whole thing in one go. And also think critically about how your car may or may not comply with the rules in the book. And also ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, ask one of your friends who's working on the car with you. Ask an advisor, or maybe even ask Dr. Marks, right? He, at the end of the day, is the arbiter of what is true and what is good, what is correct for the Solar Car Challenge. So if anything comes up, ask. So jumping straight into things, entries. So section 3.6 on reports and data sheets. I believe there was 7 documents initially required, but there is a new one this year, budgets. And I think Dr. Marks harped on this earlier this morning, so a bit of a refresher. So the final report must contain a budget, and that's basically just a spreadsheet containing all the expenses that your team has accounted for over the time from, I guess, whenever the prior race ended until this coming one starts, or from just whenever you started building the car, really. Some key things to include in the budget: the list price, or the actually the list price and the actual price of every component for the solar car, as well as operational expenses. So there's a bit of a distinction here between list price and actual price. Right, the list price is essentially the MSRP, what you can get it for, say on Amazon, Amazon.com or whatever. The actual price, or the actual cost, is how much you acquired it for. Say something was donated, it would have an actual cost of 0. However, you still have to include that list price so that we are aware. Most importantly, you need to include your hub motor price if you're using a hub motor. Well, I guess you have to include the price of your motor regardless of the type of motor you're using. But as we'll see later, the hub motor has a limit to the list cost. So there's no loopholes there where you can be donated a hub motor that has a list price greater than $2,000. But we'll talk about that later. Entries continue. So as far as the final report goes, you have until June 1st to amend your final report, after which date you'll have to have prior written approval from the director of parks. This was also something that Dr. Marks talked about earlier today about the forever miles. Up to 25 miles can be awarded to every team. Those miles that we cannot take away from you. And those miles are awarded for the quality, craftsmanship, and execution, you could say, of 3 different things: the scrapbook, the video presentation, and the in-person dialogue. There's a lot of different requirements for each of those 3 items that we will receive, so I encourage you to take a look at the book for those. And Triton, rehashing sort of what you said about 2.2.2.2, minimum dimensions for the roll bar. Essentially, right, if you don't go about performing those calculations for the 5G vertical load, we have some minimum dimensions that we require you to follow. And that's pretty much it. It can get kind of into the weeds. You don't want to do it, but stick with the minimum dimensions. Okay, so section 5.4.2, the main battery pack fuse. This photo is very, very similar to the one that was in the 2025 rule book. The only difference is that there is no minimum distance, or excuse me, there's no maximum distance between the high voltage enclosure and the battery enclosure. So whether you're wired in series, parallel, or parallel, whatever your wiring arrangement for your main propulsion pack may be, that 15 centimeter maximum distance is no longer in effect. The same thing on this graphic in section 5.4.3 for battery enclosure. There is no maximum distance here, and likewise for the disconnect switches. So moving on to section 5 for solar car regulations. Liam touched on this, but insulation. Do not use liquid electrical tape on the propulsion system wires. Just so often we see that liquid electrical tape is improperly applied, that it really just doesn't do all that much for you, right? If any copper is being exposed, it's a risk. So we just outright are banning that. Next up, lighting, turn indicators, right? Everybody's hazard lights and right blinker and left blinker. This is something that has to flash automatically without manual intervention of the driver. That's how the rule is written in the rule book. And specifically, you might think, oh, well, manual intervention from the driver. Maybe the passenger can do it. No, there cannot be any human intervention. We want you to flip a switch, and then it will automatically blink at the prescribed rates for right flasher, left flasher hazards. So make sure you have that in place. Up next, air circulation. So forced air ventilation cannot have an on-off. So if you have a fan for the drivers, well, actually not if you have a fan, you must have a fan for ventilation for the driver. Right? Whenever that auxiliary system turns on, that fan should turn on and remain on. Nature of the events, right? So this is one thing that we've touched about a fair bit today, about how this coming race is a cross-country event. It's a little different from close track race, but I want to briefly highlight some verbiage change for ties, essentially. So, right, for each day, as well as overall, we account solar car miles driven as the metric for score. If you trailer, right, those miles are not really awarded to you by us, right? You can trailer the whole thing and you will get 0 miles for that day. But if you drive the whole thing, then you get all the miles with the solar car. So if, let's see here. Okay, so the team with the average speed for solar car miles driven will place higher than the others. Okay, so what that means is essentially if both teams drive all the miles, the team that drives the fastest will be placed higher. And if both teams, let's say, are very, very close in average speed, and if that average speed is less than 1% difference from each other, then there will be tied there. Okay. Scrutineering. So another provision has been added to section 7.10 for random inspection following some other racing organizations, I suppose. Throughout the race, any team may be randomly inspected. So initially it was just all the first place teams after the race could be randomly inspected, but now every team can be randomly inspected. But don't worry, we won't inspect your car during the race day. We will be doing that outside of the race. So that could be before or after. So just keep a heads up about that. And then registration. So the registration packets just will not be accepted without the company registration fee. To incur a $150, a $250 penalty. That penalty is no longer in effect. We just won't accept your registration. So levels of participation. So there's been some changes, I suppose. Once upon a time, I guess this was whenever I raced, only advanced division cars could use hub motors, but now any division can use hub motors. The key thing now is that a hub motor with a list price exceeding $2,000 may not be used. So that is across all divisions. Okay, advanced, any price.
Classic and advanced classic, you can use the hub motor so long as it's under $2,000.
I see.
But if you're going into advanced, you can have a hub motor that's above.
Okay, sounds good. So just for clarification for people in the back, advanced teams can use however an expensive hub motor they want to, but classic and advanced. Yes. Sorry.
$2,000 the motor and the motor control.
$2,000 for the motor and the motor control. So just be aware of your accounting here. And I guess another thing about the budget requirement for the final report, but at the end of the day, we're an educational program. So the budget gives students some accounting experience as well. So let's see here. Judging, judge liaison, another thing that we talked about earlier today. It used to be just a line item in the judge's daily checklist saying that we have to assign or we have to find someone on the team that will be a team liaison. A team liaison has to be a designated person for us. But this team, this judge liaison individual is now codified in the rule book. So teams should try to find someone who is very good at communicating what the team intends to do, what has been done, and just have that single point of contact for the entire team. Because as a judge myself in prior years, I can say that it can be kind of, I don't really know who to talk to. We don't know who's on your team. So having this one person that we can go to talk to about any issues that we might see, or for them to update us, it makes communication just much more streamlined. Let's see here. And also, we clarified section 24.10 failure to secure. That penalty may be assessed whenever the car is in motion or whenever they are moving onto the track or off the track, or also onto the road or off the road. So another clarification with the trunk. The rule used to be written in such a way that the compartments or the trunk had to be a certain size. But really the intent is that the trunk can store an object of that certain size, not that the trunk is that size. So make sure that we can get an object that big into the trunk. I would highly encourage every team to try that before coming to the race. But you might have to do a fair few modifications. And then also just another clarification, 32.3.4, you can access your power station. That's it. And then finally, the cruiser division. You must have a door. You must have a door. And those doors must be latched shut securely whenever the vehicle is in motion, and you should be able to unlatch it in a reasonably quick time for passenger entry. I believe Triton spoke about this as well, but the solar array cannot overhang and cannot be supported by struts. And again, the trunk for the cruiser division, we have to be able to put an object of that size within the trunk, not necessarily that the trunk has to be that big. I mean, I guess the trunk has to be no smaller than that size, but key thing is we have to be able to put an object in that trunk.
Does the trunk have to be good?
I do not believe so. I think be really wherever.
It could be French, put it in front.
I suppose the key thing is that you can't consider like the cabin of the vehicle to be the trunk. Yeah, I believe it has to be some discrete area. Liam? I'm sorry?
Do you have to have a separate externally accessible door or can I exit from inside the vehicle?
It's a great question.
It's externally accessible.
Externally accessible. I copied this pretty much straight from the rulebook, so yes, it does have to be accessible from the inside. Let me double check that.
That's true, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, that concludes all the changes about the rules. Yes. I would say that you should put the full price. I mean, that can kind of that would become an accounting nightmare. I would say just for every receipt that you get, put it in the budget spreadsheet.
I would say so far, if they got it, replicate it, to say how much, like it's easier just math wise to say, all right, I buy this month, get a money for the month or like that. You still pay that amount of money for that. Right, so.
The value to us, we get a real budget that we should use this year. And when we have a new team, the question they always ask is, how much it's going to cost us? So we can show a budget that was done every single year. That's not an end all to end all, but it does give you an idea of it. Matthew, you've done a great job talking about it. You did great. Ladies and gentlemen, we have tried today to give you an overview of what it's like to be in the solar car project. Now, we didn't discuss everything. We didn't want to scare you. We wanted to provide you a foundation on which to build your understanding about what's going to happen. Now, the January workshop will be more detailed. And there's always that other resource which we've talked about. If you have a question, contact me. Send me an email. Spell out what you want to do. If you have a question, put a picture in there or whatever. But I want to thank you for being a part of the September workshop. Now we all get a chance to go home and see whether or not if Oregon did beat Northwestern or whether or not Oklahoma won. So I hope y'all have a great day. Let's go get some football.